So let's go ahead and start our budget meeting. Thank you very much for joining us in our budget meeting. Oh, we ready, Ken? Sorry. All right. We'll go ahead and start our budget meeting. Thank you for joining us this morning for our budget development meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Adamson?
Here.
Bray?
I can't hear.
Bray? Well, he's away from his desk. Cheatham?
Here.
Lurick?
Here.
Ortega?
Here.
Stevens?
Here.
Glad?
Where am I at? Here.
And let's try Bray again. Bray? Well, we can see him, but he's just not answering. Okay, I'm going to say he's here.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to agenda item 2 as fiscal year 2021 budget development overview. Before we do that, Council, I just wanted to let you know that I have pulled off agenda items 6 and 7, employee compensation and 2021 revenue update. I want to have that discussion in person. I think it'll be a better meeting for us. We'll be able to get more accomplished if we're in person. And so I've pulled that off until next week, and we'll address those two things next week, and will give us some time to get all of that put together. Plus, it will help us with the employee compensation to have the benefits and the decisions we're going to have to make with the benefits taken care of, so we can have real numbers there. So just want to let you know that. With that, Ashley, why don't you go ahead, fiscal year 2021 budget development overview real quick.
Yeah, so just a quick update. We were able to get through almost all the department presentations. So Chief Gates is going to be presenting fire and ambulance to you today. Then we'll have those all wrapped up. We've been keeping track of requests and also the reductions in a couple of spreadsheets, so we can look over those on the 4th. Like the mayor mentioned, we want to do those in person. And so we will have those, and it gives us a little bit more time to put those numbers together. This budget seems to kind of have been squished into May. And so it's been fast and furious, and we want to make sure that we have some good numbers to present to you. So we will present those on next Thursday morning, and then we should be able to enter a few things into the file to bring a tax solution to you. Probably, I'm thinking maybe that afternoon if possible. So that's what we're kind of looking at. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything that the council needed from the finance department to bring next week. We're also going to, as part of the revenue presentation, be bringing some fees that you have asked to look at, like the engineering fees. We're working with Merrill on getting those updated, so we'll bring those as part of revenue. Is there anything else that the council would like us to bring?
So actually, Chris has something. Chris, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, Ashley, you were going to, you presented a slide last time that had the actual property tax revenue on it, and that's not a slide that, as far as I'm aware, we have. And I had asked that you get us that info, and to my knowledge, it hasn't shown up yet.
Okay, we will get that over to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for Ashley before we get moving into interdepartmental transfer clarification? Okay, thank you. Ashley, go ahead.
Okay. So I know last week we kind of had a discussion about the administrative fee. So I did just want to touch base. I was going to put a presentation together, but it was a weird, like, it was a little hard to put into slides. So I was just going to kind of go over why we do those. When the council appropriates a budget, which means, you know, we go through the whole process, we do the public hearing, the ordinance passes. We are basically saying that, you know, we appropriate per fund, which we're required to do for the tax funds. We actually do it for all funds. So basically what we're saying is we're giving the general fund authority to spend so much money. We're giving street authority to spend so much money, and it has to be for those specific purposes. So the general fund can be used for pretty much anything. It has to cover for other departments if there's deficiencies there. But street funds can only be used for street projects, and they're extremely, like, they're monitored really closely. So we have to make sure that we're following, all the rules with the money that they're using. Recreation funds can only be used for that purpose, library, and so forth. And so what we do is when another department does work, so like if street does abatements, then, technically that's not a street fund. It shouldn't be used for that. So we have the general fund reimburse them for those costs. So the one thing that I did want to go over, let me just pull this up, is the administrative fee. So basically why this fee is charged, we have this huge spreadsheet put together that calculates everything based off of square feet for City Hall, HR fees, mayor's office, finance, and legal. So basically, if you had, let's say, a fire department that wasn't part of the city, they would have to pay for these services because you have to have, the payroll, you have to have the HR, you have to have the financial statements, and you have to have the legal. And at the mayor's office, where they're publishing the ordinances and putting all the agendas together, we put that into an administrative fee for every department to pay. Because if they didn't have those within the city, they would have to pay for those outside of the city, if that makes sense. So we have a huge spreadsheet put together. Admin support is one of the biggest ones. Like I said, it covers, if you're in City Hall, we kind of break that out per square footage. And so each department pays for their portion. We have each department pay for their portion of human resources, and then finance, legal, and the mayor's office. So it's kind of based on wage expenses and total expenses. So your bigger departments that have bigger budgets and more expenses, of course, are going to have a higher fee. So there's also things like the insurance for liability, like risk. We break that out based on people. We have IT support, which Chris has put together a great spreadsheet kind of based on, what everybody has. So like finance has so many computers, so many Surface Pros, things like that. Of course, there's the fleet charge. And then, we have some enterprise funds like the public works, utility billing. So we kind of just put those together so that those departments are paying for their portion of the services that are provided to them. And those are done monthly. So we're just trying to make sure that, the general fund's being reimbursed for things that they're doing for other funds. And that is, as long as we have some sort of support, which we do have a great spreadsheet showing how that cost is calculated, then we are good to do that. So I know that there was, some mention last week about paying that admin fee, and that covers all of those things. And generally what we found is that having the city provide those services is a lot cheaper than if somebody had to go out and hire individually for those services. So I just kind of wanted to touch base on that to let you know why that is charged. And then, there are a few other interfund charges as well. If you have any questions on that, I can, always go over them with you, send out an email, just let me know. But are there any questions right now about those fees? Claudia, do you have a question?
I do.
Thank you.
So I guess my question is the same as it was last week. If every department is billing each other for services that they're providing each other, I understand the concept. I'm curious why the police department appears to be the only department that does not bill anybody else for any service. So why is one department, which runs 24 hours a day, the only one that doesn't bill and get reimbursed for anything that they provide?
And they technically could, if they put together some sort of a schedule or like a spreadsheet, they could. I guess the difference with the police department is they're providing public safety, which is not just like a city department function. It's the function of the city as a whole, if that makes sense. So it's a little bit different, but they definitely could look at charging. I mean, I don't know if they would want to charge every time they have to go help HR with the situation, but usually it's for the public safety of the city as a whole, if that kind of makes sense. That's a little bit different than providing a service to only city departments.
Well, but there are times when they're providing a service to a city, another city department can do its job.
Right, and we can
So-
definitely look at that.
So, yeah, and wouldn't that be, why would it be on them to come up with that schedule? Why wouldn't it be on your department to come up with that schedule of how they would charge?
We would just need
You
to
know all the costs.
Yeah, I mean, and we would put that together. We would just need to work with them. Like IT, Chris put together a spreadsheet of how he kind of, what he thought would be a good basis for cost. So I would just need to work with the police department as to what they think, is there usually a certain officer that goes out? Because we would need to decide what the cost would be and the time and just things like that. So we would help them with those numbers for sure, but we would need to work with them as far as how to put that together.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? I know that was kind of, like I said, I was trying to put it into a presentation and it just wasn't working for me. So you guys good with that?
Seeing none, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to fire. Dave, you're a week late.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, Chief Gates, Pocatello Fire Department, Bannock County Ambulance. First, I'd like to thank you for your support over the years and going forward. I know COVID-19 presents challenges, but I'm confident that we'll weather that storm as we have others in the past. It's an honor to be your fire chief and work with the dedicated members of the fire department and the rest of the city. I'd like to share a little history before we start. There's a saying in the fire service, 100 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. If you think about that, that's kind of an interesting algorithm. But what I really think this means is that we're very proud of our very rich history and profession, an honored profession, and that changes are heavily scrutinized as they often are a matter of life and death. As an ex-military guy, the term battle proven kind of comes to mind. And so I hope you understand that we are very thoughtful when we make changes. With that as a backdrop, I'd like to talk about some of the things that we've done in our history that in my opinion, suggest that this department has a long history of being change leaders in the state and the nation. I don't know if you're aware, but EMS was born in the mid-60s. Some of you may recall, if you're old enough, that the show of the 1970s, Emergency with Roy DeSoto and Johnny Gage. Well, the Pocatello Fire Department adopted fire-based EMS back in 1978. We were one of the first in the state to do so. And across the state, departments today wish they had have. And I think I'll show you why here in a little while. In 1991, we were the first to establish a state-sponsored hazmat team. 2005, we were following 9/11, we stood up a state-sponsored USAR team. 2008, we developed a strategic plan that the entire department engaged in the creation of. It was the first one of the department's history. And quite frankly, if you knew the fire industry, most fire departments across the state had not even thought about strategic planning. We developed our mission, vision, values, and several strategic issues which today guide the department. We've been early adopters in many fire tactics, such as slicers and nozzles forward. We explored and utilized what are called fire extinguishing grenades in our non-fire apparatus with some pros and cons, but we've engaged in those types of things. Something I'm super proud of, in 2017, we established an assisted living protocol that I think some of you are aware of. That assisted living protocol has been recognized nationwide, and our community relations person, Kim Staus, has actually been requested to present nationally because it has been recognized, and it has absolutely, and if you look at our call numbers today, it's one of the things that I think has caused our call numbers to go down. 2018, we engaged with a National Fire Protection Agency in their community risk reduction pilot program. We're one of 25 in the nation that utilizes data and GIS technology to be able to visualize your community's risk. and we're still in the process of establishing that.
Hey,
2009
Keith,
Yes, sir.
Keith, I'm trying to find you on where you are in your presentation, and I'm not seeing where
This
you
is just this is just an intro. I'll get there. This is just
Okay,
an
all
intro.
right, okay.
And in 2019, we've established a model committee to evaluate and recommend how best to meet the demands of going forward. And in 2020, I think we've been instrumental in several fronts with COVID-19. We have been instrumental in the stand-up of our community's response to COVID-19. And I'm proud that I get notices all the time from citizens saying that they're proud to see our firefighters leading by example and wearing masks in public places. So there are countless other things to be proud of. Not too many to mention today. You should be proud of your fire department. I'd be remiss if I didn't respond to Major McCoy's comment last week. And I think it's common knowledge that everyone knows that the one thing that police and firemen have in common is that they all wanted to be firemen growing up. So next slide, Ashley.
Nice jab.
That's all right. I'm a control freak, Ashley. I'm used to controlling my own presentations. So our mission is to help people. We're dedicated to preserving life and property through the prevention and professional compassionate response. And I strongly believe that our members fully embrace this mission every day. Next slide. There we go. So I'm going to be pretty highlighting this. Our key services are emergency response. You know, in history, we always thought fire departments just responded to fires. We are what's termed a all hazards fire department. We not only respond to structure fires, we respond to wildland fires, miscellaneous fires, dumpster fires. We respond to hazmat calls. We respond to all the things that are related under the USAR, which stands for Urban Search and Rescue, confined space, trench rescue, rope rescue, collapse. We provide the aircraft rescue firefighting for the airport and the notorious Portneuf River. We also have been known to do water rescue out of the Portneuf, as well as, of course, EMS. So those are our emergency response goals. They're copious. In the preparedness arm, really, it's preparing to be able to respond. That means our equipment has to be ready and prepared. Our equipment has to be ready and prepared. We have to train, and I can't highlight enough that there are so many things that we don't do on routine basis that we have to spend copious amounts of time training in order to be prepared. The one I always fall back to is giving birth. There are paramedics that have practiced for 15 years that have never delivered a child in the field, but they have to be prepared to deliver a child at any moment's time because it does happen. We also engage in emergency planning, the emergency operation plan, working with other agencies throughout the county emergency manager, public health, and other agencies, police department, in planning and coordination. Obviously, our mitigation is a critical component. You know, that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Our prevention arm spends a lot of time inspecting businesses, making sure businesses are doing things that are safe for the people that come into them. We review plans to make sure that the buildings are built to fire code in today's world. And then our community outreach program, which is really, you know, a huge, I can't say enough of how much that has helped our department. Everything from fire safety to elder fall prevention to red card programs, which are having all the information on somebody's front door to when to call 911, the assisted living facility, junior fire center, and then Firewise. And then obviously the boring side of the fire service is the administration and support, agency planning, policy, budgeting, process, analysis, large incident command support, EMS billing, payroll, admin, and then the copious amounts of federal and state reporting requirements that we have to meet. Next slide, Ashley. So this is our staffing. I know the council is interested in knowing what our total staffing is, this is everything. So I have included fire and EMS. And I'm a kind of a visual person. So if you'll go ahead and go to the next slide, Ashley, I will kind of describe this. As you can see, we use what's called an incident command structure, fire chief being the lead. I have an assistant under me. I have an assistant chief of public safety and technical support, an assistant chief of operations, and an office manager. My assistant chief of public safety oversees the prevention and support side, which is the prevention captain, a fire inspector, and our emergency vehicle technician. That person also takes care of all of our facilities, software, hardware type of stuff, as well as our community relations person. So that's that arm of the department. Under our operations, Chief O'Hearn oversees the 3 battalion chiefs, which are our operational hub, if you will. They're what we call the line. So everything below those the battalion chief and below are a platoon. So he oversees the division chief of training, each platoon. So we run a 24/7, 365 model. Each platoon works a 24-hour shift. So a battalion chief oversees the 5 stations that you see below. Each station at any given time has 1 captain, 1 driver, at least 2 paramedics, and 1 firefighter. You see some extras in there. And then he also oversees our volunteer arm, which is for our ambulance district, Lava Ambulance, Income Ambulance, and Downey Ambulance. And then the office manager has an EMS billing person, a fire administrative assistant, and then we have 2 part-time EMS fire admin assistants, and sometimes we have an ISU work study. Any questions on the basic flow of that? If none, and feel free
Claudia has one. Just
Go ahead,
a minute,
Claudia.
So just for clarification, each platoon works a 24-hour shift at a time. That's it? Just one platoon, right? Works 24 hours? Okay, thank you.
Yep. And they work a really odd schedule. It's hard to describe, but I could do that if at some time you're interested. So then go ahead, next slide. I like this slide particularly. This is us tracking basically our monthly call. As I reported to the mayor the other day, we had our lowest month in the last 7 years. That's what prompted Major McCoy's response to his workload going up and ours going down. But I think this slide shows you that we have a lot of variability, but we also have some consistency. We peaked in 2017. That was our high. We've actually been on a slow decline since then. I think in large attribute to our efforts from our community relations person and all those efforts that we've tried to do to when to call 911, what's the purpose, our assisted living program. But we peaked in 2017 with 8290 calls. And if you look at our 20-year plus, we have really stopped what I consider to be a continual march upwards, primarily due to the baby boomers, which I am one of the last of. But as they enter the capacity of needing emergency response, they tend to drive the system. And so I think we've done a good job there. Next slide, Ashley. So I think it's important to remember that the fire service is an insurance policy. It's designed to stop the propagation of fire at its earliest possible point, i.e. that's what saves lives and reduces property damage. And ultimately, it takes a certain capacity in order to safely and effectively mitigate a fire. The system that we have today in Pocatello is designed per the NFPA standards for a basic 2,000 square foot residential home without a basement. We are not staffed to attack a large strip mall or a high rise, which are much higher labor intensive. So we're really kind of at what I would consider the bottom. It takes by NFPA standard, it takes 15 personnel to safely attack a 2,000 square foot fire. I could tell you what roles each of those play, but that takes all 4 of our fire engines, 1 ambulance, and a battalion chief in order to do that. So When you look at this, we responded to 7810 calls in 2019. Only 81 of those were real fires where we, actually put water on the hot stuff. There were $49.5 million of structures involved in fire. Of that, we had a 99.5% save rate, and so therefore we had pretty good save rate. And most importantly, we had no injuries, no serious injuries, and no deaths related to fires. I think it's hard to justify an $8.4 million budget for 81 calls, and I think what you see over time is that fire departments across the nation have, in order to continue to remain relevant, have engaged in these other tasks that I describe. And that's why we do EMS, and we can talk more about that. But it's also why we do hazmat. It's also why we have a capacity. And our intent is we have this capacity. We need that capacity to respond to fires. And it's a ready, available staffing to go then respond to these other things. Go ahead, Councilman Cheatham.
Dave, I have a concern about a comment you made about the high-rise structures. Are we then not well prepared to battle a fire at, say, an ISU dorm, or the new proposed apartment complex in Northgate, or the new one that's being proposed for ISU housing?
That's a great question. So I would turn to that. We've already battled two fires at ISU, and we were successful. So the facts are that we did get it done, and I think that's something to the credit of our firefighters and their capabilities. Are we meeting the standard, and do we have that capacity? No, we have not. We attempt to meet that capacity in two ways. One is to call in overtime to staff up, as well as some of our mutual aid agreements with, say, Chubbuck. The problem is, and I've said this many a times to many people, we are really a silo community. And I'll give you an example. If Pocatello were plopped down in the middle of the Treasure Valley, I have ready available all of the staffing from Caldwell, from Napa, from Meridian, from Boise, from all of those agencies to help me. Well, my next closest agency of similar size is Idaho Falls, 45 minutes away. So no, we're not. If I were to meet the standard, it takes 27 people to battle per NFPA standard, to battle a strip mall fire or an equivalent dorm fire. And so we're getting it done with what I would call a shoestring amount of people.
So is it people or is it equipment that are the?
It's people. So NFPA literally identifies each task that has to get accomplished and kind of looks at it from the sequential. If it means anything to say, we can either do it one at a time, meaning I can have one person do all tasks, but it takes a long time to accomplish that. But fire grows exponentially, so it's important that we accomplish a lot of tasks all at once, and so in parallel. And so it takes those extra people to safely and effectively mitigate a fire. And I'm happy to go into more detail anytime somebody wants to stop by my office. I'd be more than happy to talk fire. I love it. It's been my profession for 27 years, and I am deeply passionate about fire. So we completed a mission, our master plan, and I think from a couple of points, I would say it was a great document in that I think it validated a lot of the things that we were doing. It certainly gave us things that we knew we needed to do, some emphasis to say we needed to move forward, and it also gave us some new insights, all of which we are attempting to meet. Mission Life Award is an American Heart Association award. This is our 5th consecutive year. We're like Gold Plus is, I think, what we're called. And what that means to you is Pocatello is a good place for you to have a heart attack and survive, in the short same name of things. So speaking of fires, big fires that take a lot of resources, in 2019, we also received the Above the Call Award for the Safe Haven fire, which was in 2018. But again, a significant, I can't tell you how many reports I've read across the nation where assisted living facilities have had multiple fatalities when they had a fire. And in this case, we had none. No fatalities of the the residents and no fatalities or injuries from the fire department. We received our community outreach Jeep made possible by donors, and I actually am remiss. We did get that. We applied for the NFPA community risk reduction grant in FY18, received it in 19, and it's being built out as we speak. And then, as I said, training is our backbone. We conducted 14,600 hours of training, 26 promotions and step-up qualifications. We had 35 IFSAC certifications. These are basically, IFSAC certifications are a independent third-party validation of the skill sets that our members have. All right. I want to, before...
Councilwoman Ortega has a question.
On those certifications, are those for the department as a whole, or are those for the individuals?
They're for
those
individuals.
certs.
They're for individuals.
Okay, thank you.
So I heard a lot of conversations about comparisons, and so our next two slides are comparables, and I think it's very difficult to do comparisons. It's kind of like comparing the Joneses, right? Everybody always looks at your neighbor and, oh, they've got more cars, more RVs, bigger house. Well, you know, maybe they don't have kids, maybe they have a ton of debt. So as I always say, the devil is always in the details. Fire departments are no different than any other system that responds to the environment in which they're established. Thus, what is done in Pocatello may or may not be done in others, and one way is not necessarily right or wrong. I think I'll show you that what we're doing for administrative fees is not done other places, but that doesn't make it wrong. What Ashley says and what we've established as administrative processing fees is reasonable. A full understanding of the details and the relationships is important. Comparing extra wages. Well, I'll talk about that. Ashley, you want to go ahead and go to the next slide? So I've compared 3 departments. They are different. Pocatello, Idaho Falls, and Meridian. Idaho Falls is probably the closest to us as a department because they run a similar model. They run fire-based EMS. And you can see their budget numbers. Their staffing is quite a bit higher than ours, which I'll show you in just a second. You
Chief,
can see
I'm sorry, Chief, I don't seem to have that slide. Does everybody else have that page?
No,
I apologize.
I don't have it either, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and go through this, and Chief, if you'll just get it sent to us.
I will absolutely do that. And I apologize. Quite honestly, pulling data out of fire chiefs is about like extracting a molar. That doesn't come very easily. I was on the phone late yesterday afternoon with Meridian trying to get their finalized numbers and also kind of dig through the details. So this was kind of a last minute comparison, so I apologize. You can see the differences in budgets, total expenses. Some things that I would point out is we're low, and ultimately you can see that both Idaho Falls and Pocatello are low in comparison to Meridian when you consider Meridian only does fire. Now, when I say does fire, I want to be very clear. Meridian Fire Department responds on EMS calls with their fire trucks. In fact, they have 25 paramedics within their system. So that's a fairly common national practice that fire departments across the nation respond. The difference is Meridian calls for an ambulance, or an ambulance is dispatched from Ada County paramedics, and they may render care, but then the Ada County paramedics pick the patient up, transport the patient to the hospital, and then they get money from the patient for that transport, and Meridian does not. In both Pocatello and Idaho Falls cases, we actually manage that transport system, and therefore we're getting that. So one of the things that I would note is very similar size. Idaho Falls has more numbers of personnel than Meridian. Meridian at this point in time had similar numbers to us, but they're running $12,000 or $12 million compared to our 8.2. Our exempt personnel costs are offset because the EMS system is picking up a portion of that cost. Another point of note, because I know that overtime has always been a challenge in our community, but I want to point out a couple of things. My $450,000 extra wages is comprised of $158,000 in holiday pay, $97,000 in what's called scheduled overtime. Scheduled overtime results as just a matter of course of them working their shift because they work a 24-hour shift. And if you want an education on the FLSA, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it, but it's so complex, it makes my own head hurt. So if you really look at this, what we call unscheduled overtime, which is basically filling vacancies that are left due to staffing shortages or sending people to training or anything like that, really equates to about $206,000. The numbers over here for Idaho Falls and Meridian, those are only overtime numbers for that unscheduled overtime. Their FLSA wages, they don't get holiday pay. Their FLSA wages are all baked into the personnel costs. So again, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's what we do, but you can clearly see that our overtime is certainly not out of line. And again, Meridian has 90 people at that point in time. Operating costs, they do not, none of their dollars that are represented here are out of, have any fund transfer to other agencies except Idaho Falls. Idaho Falls does pay $113,000 for dispatch services. And again, I'd point out that Idaho Falls is a consolidated dispatch center and all of the agencies are paying into that service. And then if anybody has any questions on this, what you don't see here is that I'm being funded to an additional tune of $3.52 million for the EMS side of my operation, and Idaho Falls is being funded to $7.9 million for a total funding in Idaho Falls Fire Department of nearly $20 million. So a comparable department. Any questions before I go to the next comparable? All right, Ashley, moving on, please. All right, so what I've tried to do is show that these are the base populations. I did not include the miles that we provide for ambulance district. Idaho Falls has miles, but what you're really getting is what this shows is that our core, which is our own population, is getting served better by these increased numbers that are provided by EMS. You can see that we run last year we ran 7,800 calls. Idaho Falls ran 11,000, and Meridian ran 6,800. Populations, you can see there, our square miles are actually bigger than any of theirs. And I want to be clear, we do have 5 fire stations, but one of our fire stations is dedicated to the ARF, and they're not really available for structure firefighting. So really don't go into the calculation, whereas Idaho Falls and Meridian have 5 fire stations, and they're all structure stations, meaning that they're designated to respond into the community. We had 91 staffing. This was at the point when we still had the 3 additional firefighters that we lost last year due to the pay rate roll increases. Meridian had 90. Idaho Falls has 130. Just some kind of ratios to be considered of. We have 1.62 total firefighting staff per 1,000 population. Idaho Falls has 2.11, and Meridian has 0.079. Very low, but you get that with population density. And what this does not account for is that Meridian is adding, they are just in the process of adding a sixth station. This staffing number includes the 6th station staffing, and they're in the process of adding 7 and 8. Their line staff, remember the actual people, the people that do the cool job, we have a line staff of 1.38 per 1,000 population. Idaho Falls has 1.85 and Meridian 0.65. If you look at this from a cost per square mile covered, we're at 256,000. Idaho Falls is 536 and Meridian is 450. Again, population density. Cost per call, we're the lowest. I won't read the numbers. I think you can read those. Cost per population, obviously Meridian with their population density has the lowest, but we're pretty in the ballpark in population. And then if you look at it from a total budget cost to total staffing, we're at about 90,000, 91,000 per person. Idaho Falls is 106 and Meridian is 134. And I really do think that this is indicative of what fire-based EMS is getting us, that we're getting the economies of scale from having these services merged. Moving along, next slide. Any questions? So our goals are to basically implement the master plan to the best of our ability. One of the key recommendations was to do some sort of cultural improvement sensitivity training. And so that's really one of the target areas and one of the reasons we'll be requesting some money to do that. We have continued anything that was no cost or low cost, we have implemented as quickly as we can. If some things take more time, but we're implementing those. The remainder of our items are prioritizing budgeting for the high costs, and you'll see a couple requests for that. One of the strategic plan one of the master plan recommendations was to update our strategic plan, and we'll be in the process. We also did apply for the regional radio grant. It was supposed to have, we were supposed to get notice at the end of April at this date. I'm assuming due to COVID, we have not. And then continue with the deployment model standards of cover and standards of cover, which is in process. Next slide. So this is basically, our big concerns are we are a capital intensive operation. Fire trucks are not cheap. In fact, anything that has the name emergency tied to it generally has a markup of 10 or 20%. I feel like our department has done a really good job of trying to minimize the impact on our capital needs, but we continue to need. We asked for a Type 6 engine last year, it didn't come out. I just want to be clear that the engine we're replacing is a 1990 Type 4 Wildland fire truck. It's stationed out in Johnny Creek. We bought it surplus for $35,000. I don't know, I think 3 years after I was hired, and we continue to make it work, but it's kind of scary to drive, just to be honest. We had originally, we're going to replace our rescue truck, and we feel that we have a better proposal and we'd like to present that. Our radios, I brought that last year, but we were also applying for a grant and we wanted to see if we could get a grant for that. I want to kind of, this isn't, the sheriff and PD replaced their radios, if I'm not mistaken, it was 3 years ago. We all bought our radios the same time, and they are 15 years old. And in 2021, Motorola will no longer make parts. They will no longer make, they will no longer service these radios at all. So we need to get our radios replaced. We're hopeful for a grant. I won't talk about all the rest of these items, but I want you to be assured that when we, at least for our rolling stock, we use a very progressive database system that takes into account serviceability, age, mileage, what our duty expectations are to make recommendations. And then we just put on a good dose of logic and say, does it make sense to actually replace, retrofit, or upgrade, or whatever? And I think that going forward, we've been very thoughtful when it comes to that. And then lastly, we really want to make sure that we move forward. We spent $50,000 for this master plan, and we really want to do it justice and make sure that we continue to work towards those things. And next slide, we're to the budget itself. And I think just kind of as a forward, I think most of you received my numbers or my report. Some of those numbers changed just because of last minute budget stuff, but for the sake of the discussion, I think that it outlines most of where we are financially. Go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, yeah, like he mentioned, we had noticed some things in our salary projection file, so we made sure that we got all of those updated, and then Bonnie went through the budget digest as well and noticed a few things. So we're just getting, you know, all of this fixed so that we have the right numbers for you. So you can see there is an overall decrease in the personnel side. This is due to just retirements and turnover. The benefits other is due to the FRF money, which I talked about last week. So I did calculate it. It looks like the savings for fire is about $241,000 for the FRF. That is just the decrease in the PERC rate. So there are 66 full-time employees, and about 82% of their budget is for labor. All right. And then you can see there's like a huge delay. You can see that the operating budget, there's some movement between the lines, but overall it has remained flat. All right, back to you.
All right. And council, I just want to, you know, I understand the conversations that we've had about money and availability of potential funding. And I think that this slide, and I'm not going to go way into detail because my report discussed this, but in the end, it really reduces down to, there's a lot of things as the fire chief I don't have a ton of control over. And really it kind of reduces down to out of the $645,000 that I have earmarked for operating expenses that I have control. Once we sign the agreement for our lease, I really can't control that unless you all would like me to send the fire trucks back. And as Ashley said, I don't control that $595,000 in admin, which really means I have $645,000 in operating expense. Of that, 63 is for utilities, which means if I want the fire stations to have lights and water and sewer, then that's going to cost me that. And then there's another 108, and that's a change because I actually found another item that was contractually obligated. There's another 108,000 that is contractually obligated expenditures, which really means I have about 473,000, which is 5.6 of my total budget to train, maintain, equip, repair the 5 stations and an admin office. So not a lot of extra room. I heard a lot of department heads echo that, that they just did not have a lot of room. And I feel like we run a pretty tight budget around here. The next 2 slides, I'm going to, Ashley, if you'll just pause on those. And if the council has any questions about what we spend our money on in those lines, I'm happy to outline it. The big driver in 31 is software. That's 33,000 of the 65. The big driver in 32 is safety gear at 86,000, 11,000 for fire chemicals, which is your ARF foam that we spray there, 11,000 or 27,000 on equipment, and then 26,000 on other supplies. The big driver in 33 is vehicle repairs. We do our own in-house repairs, but all the tools and supplies that go with that. The big driver in 40 is our annual physical, $74,000. That's contractually obligated, as well as the 20,000 that the union gets for their own wellness program. That's contractually obligated. Then you have about 25K that's third party. That's so that we have to have our SCBA bottles flow tested, hydrostatically tested. All of our fire department ladders have to be tested annually and inspected. Those are all done third party. Turnout repairs, things like that. Rentals, the big driver there is just the lease that we pay the PRT for space to do shop work. And then 52. Yes, sir.
Chief, Councilwoman Stevens has a question for you.
Sure.
Yes. I'm looking at the budget comparison. Is that where you are, or you're not there yet? I mean, I think you're at budget overview. And so on the previous slide, I was curious, what are professional services? What are property services, unless that's the rental that you just mentioned? And what are purchased services?
So actually, I think that goes back to you. And I got to be honest, I'm not really sure how they bundled those. but these are the ones right here that I'm showing you right now are actual lines within my budget. I think for presentation purposes, finance has kind of merged a couple of those together. And so I don't know.
Oh, okay, with the information you just gave me, I think I can compare these two and get myself
Okay.
trained up. Thank you.
All right. 52 is basically repairs affected by other people. So that's our building repairs, HVAC systems, a lot of our maintenance agreements, our emergency generators, carpet cleaning. It also has tires and our radio repairs. We're not equipped to repair our own radios. So you got 8,000 in radio repairs, 10,000 in tires. And I got to tell you, during Desert Storm, our tires were about 5,000 a piece. So they're not, when you talk about big apparatus tires, they're not cheap. Next slide, Ashley.
Chief,
Heidi has a question.
Go ahead.
sorry, did I miss it? Did you say what the consulting services under line 40, what that was and how much is
I did.
allocated to that?
So the consulting services, the big driver in that is the annual physicals for our doctor. That's 74,000. We dump the wellness program that is contractually agreed to that the union manages. That's 20,000. We dump that in there. Unfortunately, it's kind of a placeholder because it's spent out of various things depending on what they want to do. If they want to go to training for their wellness, if they want to go to buy equipment, then it becomes but it's just a placeholder, if that makes sense. And then 25,000 is third-party services for testing of a lot of our equipment.
Thanks.
Yep. Next slide. All right. Obviously, utilities is pretty much what it is, and insurance is pretty insignificant. Communications, we've got 22,000 total for telephones, advertising, cell phones, and our internet connection. This day and age, the speed of data and our ability to do this kind of stuff is imperative. So we pay for that. The big driver, transportation meals, is to send people to training. I can't say enough to really outside training is how you learn to do new things, bring back new ideas, and kind of overcome groupthink. And in a profession that's as expansive as ours, it's really important that we get our members to training so that they can bring in new ideas. And then last is 64, which is basically our laundry services is the big driver there. All the laundry services that we have. And
Chief, I think Councilwoman Ortega has a question, and then Councilmember Cheatham has a question.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
So Chief, when you talking about travel and meals to training, do you send one or two and then they bring it back and train everybody else up, or do you send every single person out?
That's a great question. On that amount of money, I could never send everybody. We absolutely do the process where we try and identify good training, send a person, and then have them come back. And just kind of the complexity of that 3-platoon system is one of the things that drives that, is that we really end up, it's very complex to get somebody off to go to training because we have a minimum staffing level. And so in order to do that, we generally send one person to a given training. Sometimes we might send one per platoon and then let them come back, bring that back. It really is somewhat dependent on the total cost of what that training looks like. And I think Councilman Cheatham and then Councilwoman Adamson.
Dave, I'm curious on line 6200, what a municipal fire department spends on advertising.
Not much. I just wrote that in there, but ultimately that is a very, very low part of this. We do not spend much in advertising.
Why would you need any?
We do a little bit of stuff with, we do the when to call 911 in the chamber newsletter. We've done some things such as that where we, kind of use that type of a thing to make bring it to the public's attention, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yep. It's a pretty
Alrighty.
insignificant amount. Councilwoman Addison.
Yeah, on most of the travel and trainings, sorry if this is kind of catching you off guard, but what is the breakdown on like how much of that are administrative people going to trainings and how much is actual, you know, more like the front lines, you know, captains or something like that going? Do you have an idea of what?
I don't have an idea because ultimately I don't have the exact number. I say that in terms of the budget, the bulk of what we budget is for the line people to go to training, and that's really the focus. I literally only go to roughly 2 trainings a year. I go to the Idaho Fire Chiefs Conference and I go to the Association of Idaho City. So I don't go to very many conferences that are funded by the city. I actually sit on the Idaho Public Safety Communication Commission, as well as the School Safety and Security Advisory Board. And in both of those cases, those are actually funded by the governor. So not funded by the city at all. So for the most part, that travel and training is for the line people.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, I think next slide. So was there another question?
Nope, there wasn't. Go ahead.
Awesome. I understand that times are very tight, but I feel like if, you know, the old saying, if you don't ask the girl to dance, you won't get the dance at all. So on the capital side, as I said, the radios are super important. Those really have to get done. If you note down there on the bottom of the slide, if we get the grant, then it's a 10% match, and so the cost would be 45. So let's all give those good hopes that we get that grant, because that would substantially help our financial situation. The other thing we're asking for is extrication equipment of $58,000. I told you that our hazmat vehicle, or excuse me, our rescue truck is old. It needs to be, something needs to happen to it. I think we were visionary as a department, and our new fire trucks have a ton of storage space on them. And the sentiment is, let's get rid of the rescue truck, remove that from our rolling stock, and retrofit all of our fire engines with the appropriate extrication equipment. We feel like that as a better place. And ultimately, that $58,000 would be somewhat offset with the reduction of the rolling stock, whatever we could get for surplus. As you all saw last year, we don't get a whole lot for fire trucks, not nearly as much as we spent on the front end. But we're also asking for those fire truck hoists. We do have a solo mechanic. He works out at PRT. PRT has hoists for the buses. You know, if you look at a fire truck, they're really low ground clearance, hard to access. A lot of the spaces underneath, 40 to 50% of the work is done under the truck. These hoists basically make it so that the fire truck is elevated to eye level and the mechanic can work, or eye level or wherever you need it to be. Allows the mechanic to work safely and effectively under the fire truck. I'd already told you a little bit about our Station 5's Wildland engine. The new one's $180,000. And then the last one that I know is a big lift, but I think, you know, my selling point is a couple. One, we need what's called a station alerting system. And I kind of talked about this in my detailed explanation to you guys. But currently, in my opinion, what a station alerting system does is it reduces the demand on dispatch. And what that means is it allows the dispatcher to focus more on the call itself. And then an automated system, those of us that know Siri and all those great people that talk to us, it's literally an automated system that extrapolates the text that the dispatcher has typed into the field. And then that text is audibly alerting the fire department, the EMS system, and honestly could be alerting a police officer in the field. And that way the dispatcher isn't actually having to spend time communicating and spending more time getting information from the caller. So that's benefit one. Benefit two is to the caller themselves. If you've ever listened to a 911 call, callers really want to know that the emergency apparatus is on its way, and the dispatcher would be able to spend more time with the caller, not leave the caller on hold for a second while he or she dispatches the units, and allows for continuity of that call and speed of getting what we call pre-arrival instructions or pre-arrival care, meaning that the dispatcher could not spend time having to leave the screen and dispatch and then come back to give those instructions. That would all be automated. The third benefit is that right now there is no, this is complicated, but the CAD system, there is no linkage between the actual time they alert us and the timestamp of when they alert us in the CAD system. And by having a pre-alert system, that creates that linkage, which makes our data analysis much better. End of story, it's a lot of money. That's 1/3 or 2/3 of the cost of it. I personally think that it's a service that North Bannock County and a lot of other fire departments up and down the region could use that are all running on Spillman. So those are our. Go ahead.
So it looks like Linda has a question and then Claudia.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, I was wondering on this station alerting system, what other departments are using? You said that up and down our region, we could benefit from this. Who's using this now? Are you looking at that?
So I do not know of any department that's currently using this particular system. There's different departments that have used alerting systems. Honestly, Motorola is the one that has presented this system, and it's relatively new. And there's a long backstory that I don't want to go way in detail, but we had a pre-alerting system, and then it went defunct. It was kind of what I would call a Band-Aid patched together system. It crashed, didn't work. We quit using it because literally the dispatcher could alert us faster than the alerting system, which wasn't good. And then we are now in the process of kind of waiting for the new, the dispatch is supposed to get new consoles this year, and those new consoles support this alerting system. And
Okay.
It's really scalable, meaning that once you add the base to it, the base station, you can add all the satellites to as many agencies or departments that run off of the same CAD system, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Claudia, go ahead.
Oh yeah,
Nope,
Claudia.
Claudia.
Yeah, so I have two questions on that. So there's no way to know what the performance of this system is at this point. No other department in the nation is using it.
Councilwoman, I can't say that no others. It's a relatively new system, and I've seen a demo of it work, but I have not reached out, and I'm certainly happy to do that and find out who's doing it. It's something that we have been wanting, and it wasn't until the last couple of months that they even gave us an option. Just
Okay.
to be clear.
And then my other question on this system is, did I not hear correctly? You said this 266,668 is 2/3 of the cost?
Yes, ma'am. It's $400,000. Right now, I have a request in on the ambulance side of things to pay their 1/3 per kind of the agreement that we have.
Okay. And is that the agreement with the county,
Yes, ma'am.
which is expired?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So right now, are you using the hoists at PRT then, the ones that they use on the buses?
No, they're never available because the hoists that they have are always being used by their mechanics. So that's what we've just never been able to get them because they always have buses on them.
And where would you put this hoist?
We have the bay.
PRT building?
We have a bay. We rent space at PRT. And so there's a bay there that we work in. These are portable. And so just to be clear, if we ever do merge into fleet, these are portable and could be taken wherever we end up. So they're not the type of hoists that we may recall from days of old, where the old garage that had the big hydraulic lift in the center. These are portable. They lift each wheel. and they move around, and they could be used for any vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. On the proposed budget
Hey,
increase.
Dave, Chris has a question also.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually have a couple. One is, what conversations have you had with the fleet folks? Because during Tom's fleet presentation, or during one of Tom's presentations, he answered a question saying that they don't work on your vehicles because they don't have hoists. So I'm just wondering where those conversations are, if they're taking place, because since fleet seems to be a money-saving operation, why wouldn't you be, I mean, from the city's perspective, in terms of the taxpayers, why wouldn't we be actively pursuing getting the hoists over at Fleet and getting your repairs over at Fleet?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I'm supportive of the fleet concept. In fact, I would suggest that Tom and I had kind of the brainstorming in the back of a council meeting many years ago that having a fleet would be a good idea. I think that we have a couple hurdles to get over. My conversations with Tom initially kind of indicated that he was already pretty full in space and wasn't positive that he had room for us, that he was going to wait until he kind of got underway and felt that out. So that's one hurdle. I think a second hurdle is perhaps the differential in pay between our emergency vehicle technician and what perhaps Fleet is paying. And this is no discredit to Tom, but you know, Tom describes an emergency vehicle technician as a guy who puts lights and sirens and radios in a car. And I can assure you that my emergency vehicle technician is not only trained in that, but he has passed 7 emergency vehicle testing courses. He has passed 6 ASE vehicle courses. He's considerably well trained in all Pierce, which is our fire truck, specialty equipment, meaning Pierce has its own independent suspension, it's proprietary. All of the systems that go into a fire truck, he's trained in. All the ladder systems, all the pump systems, he is specialty trained in all of those. And so he's quite more than just a person who puts light bars and sirens in. And so there is that issue. And then I think finally, the issue is that right now he's in the union, and that would require negotiations in order to either extract him from the union or, you know, and I'm kind of a believer in the middle ground, just so you understand. The Fleet location is a much better location for the fire department. So if we could rent space in the Fleet system and utilize the Fleet's parts inventory and utilize the fact that the Fleet could do all of our fire non-fire apparatus, i.e. our command vehicles and things like that, I'm more than happy to jump into that ship. But those are some of the challenges that we faced, and yes, we have been having the conversations. Okay,
yeah, I'd be very interested in, you know, more in some kind of report on those conversations, you know, what solutions might be, what an ETA might be, et cetera. Okay, and then I know in preparing to write an article about North Bannock Fire, I did a bunch of research about, you know, vehicles, and I'm just interested in hearing the financial advantages to or if we do use some of the lease to own options that are available to fire departments. I mean, and if you default on, there's no penalty if you default on your lease payments, et cetera. So I'm just curious if we've run the numbers and why it's more financially viable for us to buy, and apparently I mean, like with a wildfire truck, the one we're replacing, we bought used. You know, I mean, why is new, straight cash on the barrel head always the best solution?
Councilwoman, first, we do use lease to own option. That is actually how we bought the 3 fire engines last time.
Okay.
And in my opinion, it was a great option because basically a fire engine by standards is good for 20 years. Our lease, but that is a 2-part step. It's 10 years as what we call a frontline unit, meaning it rolls out the door on calls all the time, and then 10 years as a reserve unit, meaning that it sits in reserve for those large fires that Councilman Cheatham and I were talking about to staff, or if one of the frontline units breaks down. So the 10-year lease option puts us into a normal replacement cycle that's, in my opinion, perfect. So we do use that option. These are just the numbers. Certainly, I would be more than willing to work with finance. There are lease options for the radios as well, as there's always a lease option for the wildland engines. In terms of the new versus used, I think you and I are in the same conundrum. Our wildland season seems to have grown. It started when I started, our wildland season was generally June, July, August, and it's now kind of starting more in May and going through September. So it's getting longer. We have been able to make these used vehicles work, but it is challenging at best. And certainly we would look at another option, but this is what a new engine looks like. So.
Okay, great. Yep, thank you. Yes, I'm very well aware, especially living in Johnny Creek. I'm hypersensitive to the urban wildfire situation, as you know. So thanks for that. And then same question I ask of police. As Northgate builds out, 2 things occur. One, even without a station out there, you're going to have to be servicing that area. I know the developer has said, or one developer has said they'll pitch in $4 million toward a new station. But can you give me just a very off the cuff, nothing that I would ever hold you to, estimate of, what is it actually going to cost us, starting maybe when, to protect and serve that whole new development?
So that's a great question. So I'm going to kind of answer it in 2 parts. I think generally speaking, I have good examples. Idaho Falls just built a fire station. It ran around $8 million, maybe just slightly less than $8 million. Meridian, very similar. They built a station for about the same price. And those are basically contracted to commercial grade construction. Generally, that's the building. It's going to run you generally, and this is a very rough number, but $1 million a year to staff a station. And you're looking at another $700,000 to purchase a fire vehicle. If on the slide that you had on my issues and concerns, you can see that in order to do what I think is appropriate I think our first step is to expand Station 1 and make Station 1 a place where we start to add additional resources. I would eventually build so that we could run to many departments run multiple units out of a single station. And Station 1 is kind of our central station. I would expand Station 1 so that we could start running 2 units out of Station 1. I would buy a fire engine. I've got it on our list for 2024 so that we could then, when staffing was available, run the additional unit out of the station with kind of an eye towards building a Station 6 in 2028. Obviously, that's somewhat dependent on when, how fast Northgate builds out. The one thing that I was hoping I would get out of the master plan that I did not was really, and I had had these conversations with our prior CFO, Dave Swindell, is sometimes it's better to relocate stations and make sure your stations are in the right location, because it, if you think about building a fire station costs a lot, and staffing a fire station into perpetuity costs a lot more. And so my first step really is to do more of and that's kind of what this deployment model, standards of cover, is dealing with, is really asking ourselves, are the station locations where they're at appropriate? The strategic or the master plan suggests that we should move Station 2 to basically US Highway 30 and Alameda. I'm not confident that that's the right location ultimately, but it's certainly worth the data analysis to ensure that our coverage is correct, because our system really is designed to be forward placed, meaning that the closer we can be to the calls, the better the outcomes. And so we really want to make sure that, in an ideal world, I would have a fire station within 4 minutes of every structure in the community. That's an ideal world. So our goal is to try and make sure that we are strategically placing fire stations in order to meet that objective.
Right. So at a minimum, if you expanded Station 1, there would be whatever those construction costs would be, which would not be insignificant, plus $700,000 for a truck and all the maintenance, et cetera, that goes along with that, and $1 million a year for staff. Is that ballpark-ish?
That is ballpark-ish, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Today's dollars.
Pardon me?
In today's dollars.
Yes, in today's dollars. Good point. So of the 26 promotions, you lumped promotions and steps together. So same question I asked police. If I certify and I'm now promoted, or I'm now eligible to be an XYZ, I'm assuming that I don't automatically get paid more because of the certification, that I don't get the higher promotion pay until the department needs me and puts me in a different position. Is that correct?
That is correct. You're paid for the position that you're in. We do have a program that's called a working out of class, and that's specific to very select. So if I am a captain and the battalion chief for the day is on vacation or sick, and I, as a captain, step up to battalion chief, then I would get paid for the day that I covered in that role. Does that make sense? But
Yes,
other
it
than
does.
that, you don't get paid just because you meet the certification.
Right. Okay, great. And then have you looked at the potential, and because I'm assuming if you send a firefighter or several to an out-of-town training, that we get into overtime, and we certainly obviously get into per diems and all of that. And so, and since you're sending one person out, have you looked at the cost differential between, at least for a few trainings, bringing someone in and then potentially marketing the training that we're having here locally to other agencies in our region?
The answer to that is absolutely. We brought in some fire inspector programs last year. We're always looking at doing that. The conundrum is the front end costs and also getting the right people to training. Sometimes we'll host training and we won't get great attendance. So there's kind of a dual role. But yes, that we do that mechanism as much as we can and when appropriate.
Okay, great. And then finally, who manages the contracts for the city? I mean, who keeps track of when contracts come due and, make sure that we start negotiating them well in advance? I'm assuming, but I don't know, I'm assuming that's not all on your shoulders. I mean, do we have like a citywide database of all our contracts so that because we had a problem at the animal shelter, we have an an expired contract at the water treatment plant. We have an expired ambulance contract. I mean, who manages the store relative to these issues?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, I think each department head is managing their own store. Just to be kind of honest, when I took over as chief in 2013, very beginning of 2013, the ambulance contract hadn't been updated since 2004. Hadn't been signed, hadn't been anything. So it's not unusual. And even once we decided to upgrade the contract between the county and us, it seemed like we are only reviewing and updating the contract every 2 years. And I'm going to be very honest, I thought the contract had kind of the clause that says this contract remains in effect regardless of whether we renew it until one or other parties gives the indication that they want to step out. So,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And they kept sending us the money and we kept providing the service. So I think ultimately the contract remained, even though by title and propriety, it was not signed.
Would you see any downside to having, for example, the legal department maintain a database of all the city contracts, since they end up reviewing them and helping with negotiations? Would you see a downside for your department to have the legal department maintain a database so that we're making sure we're on top of these timelines?
I think that would be very appropriate. I'm hesitant. It's above my pay grade to recommend what the legal department should do.
And above mine also, but I'm just asking if you see a downside from your perspective to having our
Absolutely
contracts.
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And I think ultimately it would be a good way to have that database, because we all get busy and those contracts are not something that are always top of mind. So.
And my final question, when we're looking at comparative communities, I know it's difficult because there really aren't necessarily across the board good comparative communities in Idaho. But for example, if we use square miles, Meridian has fewer square miles, but their population is approximately twice ours. And so their numbers are higher, but they're a higher density community and they're serving twice as many people. Caldwell is actually very close in population to us, although they're not spread out quite as far. They have 41, almost 42 square miles, and Pocatello has, right around 32 square miles. So at some point, not today, I'd be really interested in thinking about how, for a variety of purposes, we make good community comparisons, because we seem to always use Idaho Falls, but their population is slightly larger, but their density, their square miles is almost 10 square miles smaller. So I don't know, that's not really probably a question for you. I guess it's a request to the mayor that we at another time have a conversation about what criteria we actually use consistently or in unique situations, and we establish some kind of norm rather than leaving everybody to have to do it on their own. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And just to be clear, I probably should have included Caldwell and Napa as well in the comparables. For my honest, it was just top of mind. I'm pretty good friends with the chief in Meridian as well as the chief in Idaho Falls, and felt like I could get the numbers fairly quickly from them and not necessarily the other people. But to also be clear, there's only a couple departments in the state of Idaho that run fire-based EMS, Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene, and Idaho Falls. So when we talk comparables, really the comparables are the people that actually run fire-based EMS. All the rest of them run EMS, Nampa, Caldwell, but they do not do EMS transport. So there's clearly, even in that analysis, there's a demarcation, which is why I really say, in order to really gain insight on comparables, you have to understand the devil in the details. And
Well, oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think, you know, it would be to our advantage to establish some standard criteria and then some unique criteria to cover the situations exactly, you know, as you're describing. So I appreciate that insight.
that's excellent. All right. So on to the budget increases.
Chief,
Somebody else?
I want to remind you of a couple things. We've been an hour and 15 minutes. I've got our comp guy that is on the line waiting, that has got other things this afternoon, and you still have another presentation to go through. So you're going to have to speed this up a little bit, please, so that if there are any more questions, we can get to the questions. So please speed this up. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the reminder, Mayor. I'll be brief. I've already talked about these in my report, so I won't spend a bunch of time on them. How about that? I can paraphrase. I do have one shining glimpse of good news that I would like to share with you. In the analysis of the past, we lost the 3 firefighters last year. I would like to hire them back. On the good news side of things, I believe that the county can fund the 2 firefighters and the city will fund 1. I have had preliminary discussions with the county. I have outlined why I feel that that's appropriate. I won't go into details, but I do think it's appropriate in our system and the way we've been working. And so my request is actually half of that from the city, and that's assuming that the county will fund the other 2. And I'm pretty confident that that will occur. So I am requesting 1 firefighter from the city side, so and then 2 firefighters from the EMS side. Is there any questions specific to these budget increases?
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Oh, Chris, do you have a question? Okay,
No,
your speaker's on. There you go. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay, next slide, which is just our fee increases. We aren't having any fee increases for the year. We did a pretty comprehensive increase last year, and so there's none. Next slide. Mayor, I'm getting into that speed talking that we talked about. Our budget cuts. I would like to offer up, as I showed you, our budget does not have a lot of fluff in it. I'd like to offer up the 229. I calculated it as 229,000 in approximate savings from FRF. I also, part of my budget build for the county included a $58,000 administrative fee, which has not been being paid to the city. I'd like to offer up that additional revenue as part of an offsetting budget cut proposal. I offered up 2 other proposals that if that's really where you want to go, I'm really hesitant to offer it. Just to very quickly, USAR is a system that we don't use very often, but when you need it, you need it. We have done trench rescues. We are listed as every single entity in the city that has a confined space as their confined space rescue team. USAR is that. If I don't have the USAR team, then I don't have confined space rescue, which means that we would no longer be able to fill that role for On Semiconductor, Virginia Transformer, and the likes. But with that said, it is not something that we utilize with any frequency. But let me remind you, we are an insurance policy. The next one would be the hazmat program. Again, it's added work. You know, if I were in the Treasure Valley, Boise Fire would take care of all these for us and it wouldn't even be an issue. But I'm not in the Treasure Valley. I'm here in Pocatello, and our next closest help is Idaho Falls. And then I would also remind you that really all budget cuts may result in a change in working conditions. And this is no disrespect to anybody. It's the world that we live in. Currently, Title 44-1802, which is the rights of firefighters to negotiate, it specifically says working conditions and all other terms and conditions of employment. It entitles them to that, and therefore, you know, anything that we do really has to be done in concert with them. So Those are my proposed cuts if we need them. And I'd stand for any questions.
Rick?
Didn't we just buy a piece of hazmat equipment?
Yeah, we did. But I wasn't under a directive to cut 5%. So I am not recommending that we cut the hazmat team. I think that would be not in our best interest. And I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody about why, but I absolutely would not recommend cutting the hazmat team.
Okay, we have Chris and then Claudia.
Yeah, so I'm just confused. So if I'm looking at this slide, the fire budget cut slide properly, you're saying that 5% would be $32,259, correct?
So I chose to look at the 5% that I had, the directive was 5% of operations.
Right.
I don't have any control over 5%, the 206,000 in capital because they're a lease agreement.
Right.
And I have no control over. So my 5% is based on the 645,000.
Right. No, that's fine. I'm not questioning that. I'm just making sure I understand. And then if I'm understanding correctly, then everything above the working conditions bullet is where you would look to find that $32,259. Is that correct? Because those numbers add up to much more than 32,000.
Absolutely. I'm giving you options as a council to decide what you'd like to do.
All right. So it wouldn't necessarily mean, for example, just cutting the entire hazmat team, but we don't need to talk about that now, but I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Well, honestly, in my hopes, Councilwoman, is that the 229,000 savings that we're finding in the FRF, by virtue of it happening, it's a cost that will go away. And by having additional revenue from the ambulance system, that will meet the intent of the contract to cut funding. Because those two numbers, basically the, almost $300,000 are revenue that the city will no longer have to fund in the general fund.
Right. And then I would just like to be transparent, and I will call you at another time because I would like to talk a bit more and understand a bit more about the USAR, the whole USAR program, but I want to respect the mayor's desire to move ahead, but I'm trying also to be transparent. So with your permission, Chief, I will call you at some time in the near future to talk about the USAR program.
I love talking fire. Anytime anybody wants to stop by, feel free.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Claudia, go ahead.
So just real quick. So does this statement at the end indicate that any reduction in any item in your budget would result in the union having a hissy fit and wanting to renegotiate their contract?
Councilwoman, it doesn't mean they will. It just says they may. And I don't particularly like the vagueness of the language, but it is the language that we all work under. And therefore, it's not something that, I don't know. I can tell you that there are departments in the state that have argued over the color of uniforms. There are departments in the state that have argued over the toilet paper. And this is no disrespect to anybody. It is just simply what is. And so, I think we do our best in this department to work with the union on changes. As you can imagine, there is not always an agreement between labor and management on what the right thing to do is. And again, that's no disrespect. It's just a different perspective. Most children don't like to be told they can't stay out after midnight. Most parents understand why. Not trying to frame this as an adult-child relationship, just using it as a way of, I'm just a dumb fireman. I have to kind of reduce things down into simplistic terms. It's just what it is. And we try very hard to work in an environment where we we take in input and we work together to solve problems.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Linda, looks like may have a question.
Yeah, trying to unmute.
You're
Oh,
unmuted.
there. Got it. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make a comment that the union exists to negotiate working conditions. That is their purpose, and I think we have to respect that, and that is what is allowed by law. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief, let's go on.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the EMS budget. And I will be really quick. Basically, the goals are the same. I'll just skip over all the rest of that. That's mostly EMS. Ashley, it's you're up.
And these numbers have changed, like we had said earlier, we found some issues in the projection file. So the change is just due to turnover, and then the benefits other for ambulance, I calculated it out as savings of about $90,000 for the FRF decrease. There are 21 full-time employees, and they have about an 83% or 82% of their budget is for labor comparative to fire. And you can see, let's see, I don't know why the revenues are in here, but I think it's on another slide too. So let me go through. The operating budget has remained flat. There's just some movement in between the lines. And then this is the funding. So I believe this 18,000 is probably just left over for retirement funding. So that we put aside and we're able to fund part of the retirements. Then the rest just comes directly from the from Bannock County. All right.
And council, just for the sake of time, Ashley, if you just pause on these, if council, you have any questions, these are just the requests that I have in at the county. Again, the one firefighter is actually going to be 2, and that's going to flip flop. If any of you'd like to talk more in detail as to the whys of that, I'd be more than happy to. But so,
Chris, go ahead.
Is there any possibility that adding 3 firefighters will reduce overtime?
that's a great question, Councilwoman. It absolutely will reduce overtime. I'm very confident that it is kind of a conundrum because the budget, the overtime budget, as I showed you, is actually pretty low, and it has been notoriously underfunded. So to be able to show a reduction, it will reduce my overtime, but it will reduce my overtime experience. If you were to go back to the slide of the 457,000 in overtime, that year that's with 3 firefighters, we were over budget still. I've done a lot of detailed analysis from the prior years, and having the 3 additional firefighters absolutely does reduce overtime, and it is more cost effective. I would recommend doing that, but I can't show an offsetting reduction in the overtime line because it's underfunded as it is, if that makes sense. So we end up paying for it. We just end up paying for it in a more expensive way, which then really hurts the city in the long run overall.
Thank you.
Next slide, Ashley.
Ashley, because my paperwork doesn't match your slides, I'm a little more, I'm confused. So can you go back to the comparison?
Yep. Do you want the personnel?
Yeah, I want,
Okay.
because, yeah. Okay, so
There's like,
how much of this does the county pay?
all of it.
Yes, what? The county pays for all of it?
So the county, yes. There's just that small 18,000, and that is just from a retirement savings account, but the county covers all of ambulance.
I don't even, oh, this 18,000? Right here?
Yeah, there's the other financing sources,
Okay,
but the rest is all the county, the 3.6 million.
okay. Okay, thank you.
And
Ashley,
sorry,
if you want to-
sorry,
wanna
we can
go on-
send this presentation too.
If you want to go on to the operating expenses, and again, just briefly pause if the council has any questions, then we can go on to the capital. And really, that's the end of my presentation. This is all stuff that has been requested through the county.
Hey, Chief, this has been requested by the county. Are they paying for this, or what are you telling us here?
So their process is very similar to ours. I have presented them with my requests. At this point, all of the things that you've seen are capable of being done under the amount of revenue that the county has offered to give me, if that makes sense. This is one of those funds, kind of like our street fund and our water department. This is a dedicated fund. The tax dollars and the fee revenue that we obtain from this service cannot be used for anything else. And so that's, they are basically the amount of money that they have suggested is doable within this next fiscal year, based on fee revenue, anticipated fee revenue and tax revenue. All of the things that I've proposed are very doable within that amount. And so therefore, from my professional position, believe that they will all be funded. And Ashley, if you want to go to the next slide, which is just capital and the contingency funds. And you can see that they're buying radios. Their radios are 128,000. They're a portion of the dispatch alerting system, and the same concept of contingency funds. Go ahead, Councilman Cheeman.
What is a remount of an ambulance?
So we went into a process just a couple of years ago where we decided that if we went with a common chassis style and a common box style, that we could extend the life of an ambulance by remounting the box. So basically they take the box off of the ambulance and remount it on a new chassis and then bring it up to spec. And so a traditional ambulance costs about $230,000. We are now, this is our first year of remounting. And so we're now, for the next 5 years, we're going to be in remount mode. So we're basically saving roughly $100,000 by remounting a box versus buying a brand new ambulance.
Well, maybe you're getting into horses. Okay, thank you.
And that's really, Ashley, I think we can go all the way to the last slide. We did present to the commissioners on the 20th. There's no guidance required on this, but if you have any questions, more than happy to ask. There is conversations of the contract. I guess I should talk a little bit about that. And all I would do is, again, I'm not, as I said, everybody has their own way of doing things and it's very unique. I would like to have a little bit more in-depth conversation regarding dispatch and how we get to where we would like to be, because I think it's a whole lot more complicated than just simply saying the county should pay a third of the dispatch system. And I'll just leave it at that because it is very complicated. I don't disagree that the county should pay for some of it, but again, it's way more complicated than that.
Claudia, go ahead.
So this dispatch alerting system, how is that going to be different from the alerting system that we talked about for you? earlier?
It's the same one. It's a portion of the cost. The total cost is $400,000.
Oh, this is the other third?
This is the county paying their third for that alerting system.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sorry, Mayor. Sorry it took so long.
Seeing none. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Have a good day.
Yep. Thank you. So with that, let's move to agenda item 5, the 2021 employee health benefit renewal and changes. And I would like AJ, I know you're on here. I just real quickly, I know you're busy and I've got some stuff to get back to in back in Idaho Falls, and so we appreciate your patience and I know this is going to take some time to get through this one. So thank you.
Ken, can you make Heather the presenter, please? Thank you so much.
Can you see my screen? Nope. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Heather Buchanan, Human Resources Director. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you, yes.
All right, AJ, will you introduce?
Yeah, my name is AJ Argyle with GBS Benefits out of Idaho Falls. We are the broker on your benefits for your employees.
Ken, did I set this up wrong? Nope. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about 2021 health benefits that have changes. So we're not going to dip into other benefits other than to give you a quick update on this dental and vision. So please stop me because we do have lots of decisions we're asking you to make today. So this is our agenda for today. We do have 10 action items. Each of these are a decision we need to make so we can continue with the budget build and start working with our vendors.
Hey, Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
How do I do that?
Ken, how does she take it out of presenter mode?
So I'm not a very good driver. Can someone come help me?
Ken is on his way over to help you, it looks like, so. Hey, Roger, while we're waiting and everything, I understand congratulations is in order. 42 years yesterday, is that right? I can't hear what you're saying if you're saying anything. There you go.
You're right.
All right. Well, congratulations. That's a great accomplishment. 42 years. That's awesome. Yeah. Heidi, where's your hat? Hey, and as soon as Heidi gets back with her hat, and we're getting going, and I apologize, I should have thought about this. We're going to take a few minutes for a break, like a 10-minute break. Sorry, AJ, once again, we're going to postpone you a little bit.
And it wasn't working.
It should be up. Should be up and running. now.
Will you go see if you can see it?
I will go see if I can see it.
So let's right now, let's go ahead and take there we go. There's Heidi's hat. Good job, Heidi. I love it. Looks good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break real fast, and we'll be right back. For everybody returning after the break, we will. As soon
I
as
can't
get the
move.
thumbs up-
Go get Ashley or Chris Sorensen. I'm having trouble with my thing again. I can't drive apparently. Don't have
Okay.
me. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. Can you go to the next screen, next page?
No.
Nope.
The
Yeah,
cavalry.
we should never.
I know. I did
We
flip.
should have never given you the keys to drive.
Hold on. Ashley's moving really slow. I can't change.
Ashley's moving slow. You're the one that's holding the progress.
Hey.
Heather, are we getting anywhere with this? Oh, it moved. Another one moved.
Your mouse
We're
is right
good.
here or whatever.
Okay. Can you see my agenda slide?
We can.
So
Okay.
you just
This
can't
is why
see
I'm not
everybody.
the IT director. So we've now clearly defined I'm human resources.
You good?
All right. So thank you for suffering through my technological skills. Our agenda for today has 10 action items. We actually do need decisions on these so we can continue with the budget build. Each of these items should have a slide that we're going to talk about. So please stop me as you have questions. Oh no. All right, our first item is the Enhanced Employee Assistance Program. As you can see from the slide, we are looking at changing vendors, and our cost per month is going up from $11.52 per employee per month to $19. We did an RFP this year, and our only respondent was Bloomquist Hale. So our current vendor is not an option for next year. And the cost of Bloomquist Hale does include the families. So there is a decrease in the regular EAP program costs, but overall the program does increase by $10,281. Councilman Cheatham?
Heather, what is meant by enhanced? What benefit does the employee get from this new program?
So this program, this is our second year we're currently in. This program has a mandatory visit for each sworn officer, dispatcher, and evidence technician. They then can go up to 20 visits for independent situations, which is a bigger benefit than our regular EAP program.
Thank you.
And the utilization on this has been off the charts. Generally, you'll see a 4 to 6% utilization on something like this. We actually had 35% utilization, and the average person that went back for an average of 6 visits. I think this was a long overdue program, to be honest with you, and it's been utilized way more than we ever anticipated, as well as McLaughlin Young.
I agree with you, AJ. We just lost a dispatcher who was a 20-year experienced person because she just couldn't handle it anymore.
Yep, I agree. And I think this is going to hopefully head off some of those things. So
Thank you.
Linda, you have a question, and then Claudia has a question.
I didn't have a question. I also think this is critical. I think we need to continue with this, and I was going to ask if I could make a motion to approve
So hold on to
this.
your motion until
Okay.
hold on to your motion until Claudia gets her question, and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead, Claudia.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, Heather, did you say that this $19 includes the family as well?
It does this year. That is one of the changes Bloomquist Hale offers. So
Well, what would it cost us if it was just the officer, the dispatcher, and the evidence tech, the actual employee who had the benefit?
So Bloomquist Hale's model includes the family. McLaughlin's did not, and we had to pay the additional regular employee assistance program costs. We don't have that option for next year because McLaughlin Young is wanting to get out of this area with us.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Does the employee pay for any of this for the family?
EAP is a city paid benefit for both the enhanced program and the regular program. The city pays 100%.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
So I move that we approve action item 1 as presented with Blomquist Hale.
Second.
So we have a motion by Lurick and a second by Cheatham. Ruth, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Lurick,
Yes.
Cheatham. Cheatham. He's muted. There he
Yes.
goes. Okay, great. Adamson,
Yes.
Bray,
Yes.
Ortega. Ortega,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our second action item is the employee assistance program. We are staying with McLaughlin Young for fiscal year 21. However, the per employee per month charge is going up from the 227 to 269. Our head count does decrease from the 545 down to the 533 for savings of about $886. But we do need this new rate approved by council.
We've got a number of questions there. I'm not sure who went first, so let's go Roger, Chris, Linda.
Well, I was just ready to make a motion on this.
Okay, so Roger, hold your motion for a minute. We're going to go to Chris and then Linda, and I'll come back to you for a motion.
So again, for the per employee per month, I mean, this program is only for the employee, is that correct?
The EAP program that we have does cover the employee's dependents. So that includes a spouse and children.
So would they be paying, that monthly amount per family member?
No, it's only for the employee. We're only paying by the employee head count.
Okay, And does the McLaughlin Young model automatically include family, or is that the only option that we have? I guess I'm wondering why we would be paying employee assistance program for people who aren't our employees. And if it doesn't make any difference, then I get it. If it is a cost to the city, then I don't get it.
It's no different than like the health insurance or anything like that. You know, you're covering the family as a whole. We could go back to them and ask them. Generally, their model includes the family automatically. Most EAPs that I've seen does, you know, they do include the family, but that's something we could go back to them, I guess, if you wanted to. But I don't expect more than maybe 13 to maybe 20-cent savings per employee per month, if that.
Right. And then also, why couldn't this be an opt-in portion of what we offer?
When you mean like a voluntary program, is that what you're saying? You opt into the
Right.
EAP? EAP programs, it would be much more expensive because then it would be based on utilization. And if you're going to do that, in all honesty, you're better off just to run it through your medical program. This is in addition to that. And it's just kind of, you know, the mental health, the mental wellness, the things like that, that, you know, is getting pushed right now. And they're actually pretty popular. And the utilization we've seen go up significantly since we switched to McLaughlin Young, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Hey,
I'm just,
Linda?
I was gonna either make the motion or second the motion, so go ahead with Claudia.
Okay, Roger. Oh, Claudia has a question.
yeah, well, I want to know why the city is paying 100% of the cost. Why can't the employees share in the cost?
I guess you could. I don't have a single group. We've got 150 groups on the books and not a single one charges their employees for it. It's just such a low cost benefit. They usually don't look to the employees to help cost share that, but that is something you could do if you wanted to.
Okay, Roger, go ahead.
I move that we accept the new fee structure for the employee health benefit program.
Second.
Hey, you
I'll-
jumped ahead of Linda on that second, Cheatham.
He
Excellent.
can have
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Okay,
We have a motion by Bray and a second by Cheatham. Ruth, could you please?
before
call
we
the roll?
vote, could I make a
Just a minute,
statement?
Ruth. Yes, go ahead, Roger.
I think this is a low cost for preserving the capacity of our employees to work more effectively and efficiently because of mental health issues. If we recover just a couple employees that don't have to bring this to work with them, we're making back our money.
I would agree with that.
Super, I would too. Ruth, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Bray,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Lurick,
Yes.
Ortega,
Yes.
Stevens,
Chris, you're muted.
Stevens,
Apologize, yes.
Okay, super. Thank you. Then let's move on. Heather.
So our next item is action item 3. This is a change to what we call the cafeteria plan, or most employees know this as their healthcare FSA or their dependent care FSA. We are looking for a vendor change from WageWorks to OneBridge. The reasons for the change is OneBridge is less expensive, and from my understanding, they have a very good customer service team. With the transition, though, we do have to pay WageWorks for an additional 3 months for employees to use out have a 90-day grace period. So our costs for fiscal year 21 are slightly higher, but after fiscal year 21, they should drop off. The biggest benefit is this would stack benefits we already have at the city. OneBridge currently houses our HRA VIBA dollars. So that means each employee would only have one login, one debit card, one customer service point of contact. So when I go to the pharmacy and I swipe my debit card, it will use my FSA funds first and then my HRA VIBA funds second.
Linda, did you have a question? Roger has a question.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, Roger, go ahead.
I was just gonna make a motion.
Okay, seeing no questions, go ahead and make that motion.
Because this only costs us $46 more a year, I
Well-
moved that we,
So
that's
I
what,
forgot to mention, can I throw one more thing in, Councilman Bray?
yeah.
This is employee funded except for administration, which the city does cover. HR absorbs these monthly fees or the annual fees. With my budget, it's a little bit harder for me to do that. So it would be an increase to the HR budget of about 250. And then department costs vary on number of dependents. I do not believe any departments actually budget for this and they just absorb it. So the lower
Okay,
cost.
but your illustration here shows that our cost will be $7,090 versus $7,056.
It does. But if you go to the last slide where I list each action item, it does make a note that the HR does need help with the annual administration fee,
Well, that's a different decision, isn't it?
which is why I had listed all the action items together, sir.
Okay. Well, I still stand by this, just do this employee benefit change. I make that as a motion.
We have a motion by Bray and a second by Lurick. Discussion, anybody? Okay, thank you very much. Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Okay. Bray,
Yes,
Lurick,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Ortega,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to action item 4, I guess. Heather.
So action item 4 is retiree health insurance. I know we talked about this item last year and unfortunately we need to talk about it again. So last year we moved all retired participants out of the active employee pool into their own group. So they're a retiree City of Pocatello group. They affect our experience less. I'm not going to say 0%, I'm going to say less. This change was for several reasons. One, it was so active employees in the city did not subsidize healthcare for retirees. And the second part was to get out from underneath OPEB reporting, other post-employment benefits. This is a cost that is housed in finance. I believe it's about $10,000 a year. For fiscal year 21, HR is recommending we eliminate the participant pool for retirees effective 9/30. What this means is our 14 participants on that plan would then have to go out and shop for individual health insurance.
Heather, Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering about their ability to find individual health insurance. How difficult is it that for them, and do we help them do that, or are they just totally on their own? What does this do to their options?
It won't be difficult for them at all to actually find that, to be honest with you. And we actually, our office, we have one person that just specializes in that. And we're happy to bring them here to the city to meet with employees, which we've done in the past, to meet with retirees. Or we could do a one-on-one basis in our office in Idaho Falls at their home, or they can even go to their, local insurance agent, whoever they do their car insurance with. A lot of times they'll do the individual policies as well. There'll be a lot of options. We'll send out a letter, plenty of communication. There's the exchanges, there's, a lot of different options that we can go through for them. There's even a short-term plan that's actually been praised nationally that Blue Cross rolled out that would work for a lot of these people as well. That would probably be about half the cost of what they're currently paying. So
That was going to be my other question, is when they go on their own, how does the cost compare? Are they going to be looking at something comparable, or would it mean a big increase or likely a decrease?
it's going to depend on their age. If we kept the plan the way it is, they're looking at a 400% increase in the current rates. So obviously, if we took that increase, it's going to be less for everyone. But if we took the current rates, depending on their age, it could be a little more for some. It could be a little less. It's also going to depend on how comprehensive of a plan they buy as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got questions from Roger, Chris, and Claudia, so we'll just go in that order.
Okay, my question is, can they COBRA on this policy? They're going from an existing policy. Can they COBRA with who they are with?
No, once you terminate a plan, it's no longer eligible for COBRA, and this plan would be terminated, so it will not be eligible for it. So.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it was just kind of in response to Linda's question. I guess part of my perspective is that if people choose to retire before they're eligible for Social Security, that's a personal choice, and it's perfectly great. But there is currently a safety net, which is you can wait until you're 62 to retire, even if you've put in your whatever number of years. Secondly, for employees who might be our lower paid employees and who are not eligible yet for Social Security, providing the legislature doesn't do anything, we now have expanded Medicaid, which covers a lot more people than it used to. So in addition to the exchanges and so forth, I think you can work the formula. You can choose when to retire. I mean, unless it's a health issue, but then that's got its own set of coverages. And we do have something that helps our more low-wage employees.
Okay, thank you. Claudia.
I was just going to make a motion that we accept action item 4.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Ortega.
Second.
Heidi, did you second it?
I did, yes.
Okay, so Ortega, a motion from Ortega and a second from Adamson. With that, is there any discussion?
I just had a quick comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you to Heather and our Human Resources Department, and thank you to AJ. Thank you, Heather, for recommending AJ's group as our consultant, and for them coming in and being able to give us these kind of recommendations that may seem like tough decisions, but have really made a big impact. And I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but I'm looking ahead to action item number 6, which I'm super excited about. And I just want to say thank you so much and good job. And I know we're always concerned about having efficiency at the city and about saving as much as we can of the taxpayer dollars. And I think this is just a great and awesome example of it. And so I'm just really happy and excited about that.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Heidi. Linda, you had a question?
Not a question. I understand the reason for doing this and that it saves us money for our employees on their benefits, but this is a difficult one too. And so I just want to make sure that if we're dissolving this pool, that they really do have other good options, because this one is really hard for me. So that's all I'll say.
Okay, thank you. With that, we have a motion by Ortega and a second by Adamson. Ruth, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ortega,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Lurick,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move to agenda item 5. Heather?
Action item 5, this is talking about retiree vision insurance. Currently, when you leave employment with the city, we're eligible to move on to the different pools. Dental people can COBRA. By eliminating the vision retiree pool, newly retiring could still have the COBRA option, but people that are currently on the plan would have to move off onto their own. The reason for this recommendation is just to separate us further from OPEB and to keep our retiring employee options all equal across the board.
Okay, it looks like Linda has a question for you, and then Claudia.
No, sorry.
Okay,
I was
Claudia.
just-
For all the reasons discussed in action item 4, I move that we accept action item 5.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ortega and a second by Adamson. Any discussion?
Yes.
Rick?
Again, is this only 14 people affected?
There are 21 who are on, 24 on the vision plan, sir.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, then I will move, or I'll ask Ruth to call the roll. We have a motion by Ortega and a second by Adamson. Could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ortega,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Lurick,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Heather or AJ, as you go through this next few slides, we're going to give you some time to go over it. Thank you.
So I added this slide after some comments asked by council a couple weeks ago, just what type of plan we had. There's a lot more words on this slide than what I normally put because I know you're getting these packets the evenings before, so you have a chance to read them. The city does offer a defined benefit plan. That means the city goes out and shops a plan. An employee can opt in or out of that. If they opt in, the city pays a portion and the employee pays a portion. If the employee opts out of the city defined benefit, then we do not put any money towards their healthcare costs. Any questions on that? Okay. We also do have a high deductible plan. I went to IRS guidelines just to make sure we were.
Sorry, Heather.
Oh, yeah, Linda?
I did have a question. I was just curious if we have do we have employees that opt out?
We do have, well, we only have 429 employees on the medical plan. If you exclude fire, we do still have a chunk of employees who are not on the plan. They have insurance elsewhere.
Okay.
I can give you a rough head count on that later, but.
Okay. Just
would you like
curious.
me to
Thank
send
you.
that information out, Linda?
What was that?
Would you like me to send that information out?
If you have it, I was curious. Don't go to any big trouble. Thank you.
So we do have a high deductible health plan. We comply with IRS guidelines on this. I bring this up because a lot of municipalities around us, they do a deductible buy down. That is an option we could go with. It is not one that I favor. The VIVA approach, which we're taking, benefits all employees, not just heavy utilization employees. So I think it's a more equitable benefit. AJ, anything to add?
No, I agree with that. We do buy downs in a lot of our municipalities and things, and that's correct. The VIVA, I think, it's more of a consumer driven plan, which is what we want. We want that high deductible up front. Whereas when you do the buy downs, you actually incentivize utilization because you've got a lower deductible. The only way you get the benefit of having the medical plan is to actually use it. Whereas this way, they get money into their VIVA on an annual basis that they can use, when they need it.
So I just wanted to make sure that you understood how we define benefit rates. I referenced the handbook at the bottom because we do separate employment categories. So I just tried to stay within those categories. Full-time employees, they're charged a percentage as listed here, 5, 10, or 15% for medical, depending on their enrollment type. And dental is 0, 24, or 32%, again, on enrollment type. Part-time employees pay exactly half the benefit. We usually talk about this each year, and yes, that is still how we're paying that benefit. And then the last group is elected officials who, per city code, they fall into the same category as full-time employees. Rick?
Heather, you talk faster than I can listen. I don't understand the 5, 10, 15, and the 0, 24, 32% thing.
So if you're in the employee-only medical plan, the employee pays 5% and the city pays 95%. If you're employee plus spouse and employee plus one child, the employee pays 10%. An employee plus children or a family, the employee pays 15% of those costs.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Heather before Claudia?
Well, yeah, I mean, I personally think that those percentages need to be higher. I think they should go 15, 20, 25.
Okay. Anybody else have an opinion on that? Chris?
Well, I really have a comment, and you know, it's been traditionally, if you work for a school district or a public bureaucracy, you know, one of the really big pluses for that kind of employment has been that you get a good health insurance deal. So that's been the norm, the post-World War II norm. Without getting into a long discussion about, you know, the healthcare system in the United States and how, from my perspective, broken it is, I don't know that we're in the post-World War II era anymore. And I don't know that public bureaucracies funded by the taxpayers can continue indefinitely, essentially absorbing the costs for employee, the subsidy costs for employee health insurance at these extremely low levels. So I get it. I've been a lifelong beneficiary of bureaucratic, great healthcare, you know, cheap, good health insurance programs. But I have serious questions, and I just want to make that comment because it's not about disrespecting employees or not having empathy for them, but it's about the point at which we come into a collision course with reality. So a conversation for another time, but I think we can't kick this conversation down the road forever.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Linda, you had a comment?
Yeah, I respectfully disagree. I think that we saw when we were doing last year's budget and when we were going through union negotiations with both police and fire, we see that many of our employees in a lot of our departments are kind of under market in terms of their pay. And so to me, the benefits make up for that a little bit, where employees' salaries might be lower than the private world. We offer decent benefits. So I guess my comment would be that I would be opposed to changing their share. I think we need to keep that benefit. I'm not in favor of cutting it, which essentially we'd be doing if we're upping their share.
Rick, and then Heidi.
I just have a question for AJ. AJ, how do these percentages compare with the commercial market outside of municipalities?
They're a lot better than the private market, to be honest with you. You're comparable to other municipalities, except maybe for schools. But as far as the private market, it's a lot higher than the private market, obviously. So
a lot lower than the private market, or a lot higher?
The employees are paying a lot less than they would be in the private market.
How much?
It depends on the industry. I mean, more and more, the private market's moving to paying for employee only, and they're not paying really anything towards dependents. So, or if they are, maybe it's just 5, 15, maybe 50% tops. They're really moving away from paying for dependents.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So AJ, sorry, Heidi, I said you'd go next, but real quick, AJ, you said something about school districts. Municipalities is one thing, the exception of school districts. What do you mean in there? And then we'll go to Heidi, and then Roger has a question after Heidi.
Schools, their funding is a little bit different, and they're not able to pay near as much towards benefits as they used to. And as the funding gets cut across the state schools, they've really pulled back quite a bit on their funding on health insurance. So.
Okay, thank you. Heidi, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was kind of the same one that Council Member Cheatham already asked, but how we compare to other municipalities. And if I recall, Heather, was it 3 years ago that we made an adjustment to these percentages?
I believe that's correct. We did change the percentages and distributed them a little bit more equitably. I think family went from 12 to 15.
Yeah, so they did have a little bit of an adjustment. If it's not too much trouble, I would like to kind of go back and rewatch that and refresh myself on that discussion. And I believe that Roger and I were the only ones that were on the council at that time. And so it might be helpful to the others to go back and watch that too. If I was hoping you'd remember, but I think it was in 2017, but I can go back
send
and
information now.
Okay, yeah, because, and I think we can definitely have this conversation, you know, again, if we need to, or we can watch that and kind of get that refresher.
I'll send out the link and when the conversation starts.
Thank you.
Roger?
I want to begin with kind of being sensitive to our employees. I believe for the last few years, they have told us that healthcare is real important to them. However, they chose, some of them, salary over healthcare, I believe, last year. And having said that, I also believe that when we look at our compensation packages, we need to get to a formula of weighting the cost of living against some of the healthcare benefits we provide. I don't think it's going to be a huge part of it. It'll probably be 1 or 2% or something like that, because the healthcare still doesn't comport to being a huge part of the employee compensation package, but it is a part. So somehow we've got to start breaking this down, because it is a participant in the cost of living, and I think we've ignored that for a while.
Claudia?
I received this from a member of the community. Just learned our medical premiums are increasing 42%, an extra $88.99 per month. Not complaining, as my husband's employer pays 79.5% and we pay 20.4%. So everybody pays more. Everybody has to pay more. My husband and I, we pay more every year. And I've never, to be honest, worked where I got medical insurance for 5% and dental for free. And I don't think, while I get, and I'm not trying to disrespect the employees, but we have to balance out that the taxpayers of this town are feeling these exact same pressures, yet we're asking them to pay for themselves and for the employees. And I think that we have to balance that out.
Other comments? Roger?
One of the reasons we enacted the charges in the first place was because we felt like, and there was some indication that when employees aren't participants in the overall cost of their health insurance, they abuse it, or at least some abuse it. And it falls on everybody else to absorb the increases. I think looking ahead, we probably need to consider that. But the other side of it is maybe that lesson has been well learned, because as I read ahead last night, I think we're seeing a decrease in overall healthcare costs. So I'm okay with where we are with this right now.
Any other comments? Then seeing none, I will tell you I agree wholeheartedly with what Roger just said. We have done a lot of work. We've done a lot of things to get to where we are today. Heidi, you mentioned earlier that you're excited about agenda item 6, and I would go out on a limb, and it would be a pretty thick limb, I believe. I don't think I have to go out on a thin limb to ask AJ whether or not he's had anybody else that's receiving a decrease, but it's because of the things the decisions council made last year that got us to where we are, and the work AJ's done to get us to where we are. So I think that if you're looking at taxpayer savings, we've made those decisions and those things, and we've come up with, I don't know what the 12% is, but it's a big number, $700,000 to $800,000 of savings, I believe, for the taxpayers, and so I think we're in a great spot, and I think this is where we ought to be, quite frankly. But Rick, you had a comment, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, just rather than looking at 5, 10, 15, and 0, 24, 32, I'd love to see these numbers in dollars per employee and overall savings to the city before we take any action on this.
This slide actually isn't an action item. It's just educational on the employee groups.
But eventually, if this is to change, there will have to be some kind of an item. Before we take that action, I'd just like to see dollars. Thank you.
Chris, you have something there?
Yeah, I want to wholeheartedly support what Rick just said. I think this is important. I think being empathetic and compassionate to employees as we think about this, and I certainly am better able to be in that place if I have numbers in front of me than percentages. And that's not a dig at you in any way, Heather.
Well, I have the dollar amounts on later slides. I just hadn't expected this conversation right now.
Okay. All right. Perfect. But I just want to, support what Rick just said. Thank you.
So why don't we go ahead and go on so we can see what you've got, Heather?
So this slide is just our last 7 years of medical history. T is total, C is city, E is employee. I showed employee only rate and the family rate. That's our lowest and highest cost groups. I only went back 7 years because prior to 2014, in 2013, we had a high and low plan. So it's a little bit less apples to apples. I just wanted us to be able to look at singular plans so you could see what our increases were and what our rates have done. This is our, there we go. This is our 10-year plan history. So I know this is kind of busy to read in a chart. I'm just going to briefly touch on it before we move to the bar chart. So the fiscal years listed in the far left. Premiums paid, that's the city and employee costs. Overall claims, that's our expenses for both medical and prescription. And then in the last column is just the average head count we had in that year. So here it is in bar chart form. I made sure that I noted when we were with Aetna, just so you could see that shift. And then the circle at the bottom in purple shows when Fire left our plan to go onto their own. Are there any questions on these two slides? Rick?
When I was looking through this, it looks like the city gained by getting the fire department out of our plan. Am I reading this wrong?
No, you see the spike there. We actually, like, as far as the experience went down, but the premiums did go up. We actually, our overall demographic actually got a little bit worse by losing the fire department. I think we'd even be farther ahead if we had the fire department with us. And the fire actually is paying more than what we're paying for the employees on our program. But the biggest difference there, I think you're seeing there, is the Aetna difference that Heather pointed out there. So when we moved from Aetna back to Blue Cross, we saw about between a 20 and 22% difference in our discounts with Blue Cross versus Aetna. So we were paying less for our claims. And I think that's what pulled that more than anything. So
the claim cost and medical claims cost aren't just because the fire department went out. Those were something else may have affected that.
it was the discounts with Blue Cross of Idaho. Yeah, they're the largest carrier in the state and they get deeper discounts than anyone as well. So.
I just briefly added.
Looks like Roger has a question.
I think for context, it's also important to understand that the council decided to go with Aetna because there was a $400,000 premium differential between what Blue Cross would charge us versus what Aetna would charge us. So to look at Aetna as the system that hurt us, it was really, I think, being willing to look elsewhere that helped motivate Blue Cross to work with us a little better.
Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. And then you got to remember too, Blue Cross actually went through some administrative changes during that time, and they were a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. And so we had some groups we almost pulled away from them and got very close to at that same time, just because of what was going on inside Blue Cross. But they've cleaned things up quite a bit. But there was a lot going on during that time. You are correct.
Is it okay if I move ahead?
Yep, go ahead, Heather.
I just briefly added a slide on fire medical insurance. I don't have a ton of data on this area because the city does not administer this plan. The city simply pays the bill with a reconciliation. I just wanted to show you that we are contractually bound to no more than an 8% increase. I don't believe we'll have their rates until early fall because their plan runs on a calendar year. But I just wanted to show you what the increases that we had seen there were. Claudia?
How many part-time employees do we have, and how many of those participate?
So you're talking about, I would have to get a head count exactly of where we're at. I don't have that off the top. Do you, Lauren?
And how many other cities comparable to us offer benefits to part-time employees?
Most do at the same rate as what you guys do.
Claudia, I can get you exact numbers on the part-time if you'd like.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, first of all, Heather, thank you for taking the time and making the effort to put together all this comprehensive information. I really appreciate it. It's helping me understand, so thank you. So I just want to clarify, make sure I'm thinking about this correctly. So I know fire has their own health insurance pool. The city, however, pays the same percentages. How does that work?
When they left our pool, so in the second year of the bargaining agreement that's expiring this year, we took the city rate and they got so much of a percentage each year, or the actual cost, whichever was lower. So they get 8%, we can absorb an 8% increase. Currently, fire employees do not pay a monthly premium. The city costs cover the entire amount.
Oh, okay, so all right, so they, I mean, to put it bluntly, and I'm not trying to sound disrespectful here, I mean, they chose to go with their plan but the city is paying for it.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, one more question. And if I understood a previous comment correctly, the cost of the premiums for the fire plan are higher than those for the rest of the city.
That is correct.
But the city still pays them, even though they're higher than what we're paying for all the other employees.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Claudia?
And so fire is 0%. Is that just for the firefighter or is that for the family?
For every category of fire, there is 0 monthly cost to the employee.
And is that part of their CBA?
It's because of how the funding mechanism was set the first year. If they
Thank you.
exceed what the city pays, then they would see a monthly premium.
Okay, thanks.
So Claudia, to be clear too, that's not just firefighters and their families, that's the administrative staff as well. That's everybody that works for the fire department. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to let AJ take the next couple of slides.
Okay. This is just how we compare nationally. We like to use Kaiser Family Foundation's numbers. And you can see there monthly, the average nationally, according to Kaiser, is $711 a month or $8,527,000 annually. The city is currently paying $613 monthly and $7,357 annually. This is for single coverage, mind you, employee only. Family coverage in comparison, Kaiser says is $1,880 monthly. The city is paying $1,814 and $22 annually versus $21. The difference there, if you look between single and then family, is because we have larger families here, so there's more people on the plans than nationally, and that's why our numbers are a little closer on family than they are on single.
And
Claudia?
is this city versus the national average? Is this the national average of like total or other of all cities of our comparable cities across the nation?
So
This is
data that
nationally,
I
this
pulled,
isn't just cities. Yeah, this is everyone.
this is just 2,000 interviews they did with non-federal entities, Claudia.
Okay, so it's Chicago, it's Podunk, right?
Yep,
It's big
exactly.
and small, that's right.
Okay.
Any other questions for AJ on this slide? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to get us there. So this is the spending comparison more regionally to entities that we are all familiar with. Notice I put Pocatello in a nice little red box because our spending compared to our counterparts is actually very nice. We're spending a lot less than some of our counterparts around us. If you go to the chart itself, I only put 18 and 19 because I had responses for both of those years from each of these people. And the little tiny purple line is kind of the average line just to show you where we sit on that. Claudia?
Claudia.
Does this include all of those incentives and things that people get for quitting smoking and doing all that?
So this spending comparison is just the medical, dental, and vision costs that the city is paying. I didn't ask about any ad pays or any incentive programs because it wouldn't have been apples to apples then.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay.
So for our renewal this year, this slide is just letting you know we didn't make any plan changes. We left the deductibles, the out-of-pocket, and the copays all the same. The prescription change we made a couple years ago is the same as last year. So we're very happy with what we went out to shop for. And this slide used to be 2 slides because that negative 12.74 was its own entire slide, but I thought that might be a bit excessive. Obviously, I'm very, very excited to say that rates are going down this year. It's rare I get to say the word rates are going down. This renewal does include the medical plan, our GBS broker expense, the HealthJoy app, the launch of HealthJoy, and that does discontinue health coaching. Notice that is not case management. This is a separate thing we added last year that we've seen low utilization on. I want everyone to absorb that number just a little bit more. Councilwoman Stevens asked if we shop vendors, and we did this year. We didn't shop it in our traditional format. AJ's group got really aggressive and they put together a buyer's club. What that means is we walked in and we bought insurance with other groups, but our costs and our experience only affects us. It doesn't affect the groups around us, and we also maintain control of our plan. HR is recommending we stay with our current Blue Cross PPO. As you can see, the decrease for the year overall is $873,000, and the rates have gone down. Any questions? Sure, now you guys have no questions. I'm showing you a thing. So this just breaks it down.
So it looks like Linda has.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say this is wonderful. Thank you for all your hard work on shopping and finding us these incredible rates. I mean, this kind of decrease is just unheard of. So thank you both Heather and AJ for all you've done here.
Rick?
Wow, I'm basking in this decrease. I need council to understand this is not a normal thing. So next year, you probably should see a plus in front of that 12, but we're going to enjoy our 1 year in the sun here. So the savings to the city based on current enrollment numbers.
Heather, we have a question from Rick and then from Chris. Rick, you're on my screen twice now. And you're muted in one picture. The other picture, you're not.
Oh, boy. I lost my connection. I'll have to go back and do it again. No, I didn't have a question. Just to make a comment. Let's jump on this as quick as we can before they change their mind. Let's take advantage.
I hear you. Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to make a motion that we accept Blue Cross of Idaho PPO plan for FY 2021 as per the chart we're looking at.
I will gladly second that. I think it's so, I mean, we'll sit and discuss how to save $50,000 for hours, you know? And so when you're looking at a number like this, it's getting up close to $1 million. It's like a no-brainer kind of a situation. And so it's really exciting.
This is an incredible thing, I think. And AJ, and Heather, I can't thank you enough for the work you guys have done. It's just been incredible. So we have a motion, but it looks like we have a motion in a second. We have a question from Claudia.
No, it more of just a comment that I really appreciate the group buy idea and the fact that you both went after that. Because I was going to ask if there was any chance of doing something like that. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Super. Thank you. So we've got a motion by Councilwoman Stevens and a second by Councilwoman Adamson. Would you please call the roll?
Stevens,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Lurick,
Yes.
Ortega.
Yes.
Okay, super. And it does feel really good to see that negative in there. I'll just add that again. That's amazing. So, okay, thank you.
So this slide does break down the cost at the percentage splits that you asked for numbers about. Employees, city and monthly, it shows the decrease. Overall, based on current head count, the city's bill will go down by $724,000 for the year. That will obviously fluctuate slightly as headcount changes. And then what I'm showing you for the monthly premiums, there will be slight rounding differences versus the plan document that Blue Cross gets me. So you might see a slight difference there. I don't want that to alarm you, but it will be very, very small.
Any
What are
questions for
what-
Heather?
I
Claudia,
do.
go ahead.
What's it's $50,000 for Joy launch or Health Joy?
So that's in an upcoming slide. If
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I can touch it then, that would be great. All right, so this is how our rate this upcoming year compares to some of our groups around us. As you can see, Pocatello is in a nice green decrease color. Some of our counterparts around us are looking at some pretty big increases. AJ can talk to specifics if you have questions. Okay.
Okay, so all my energy, I'm done.
All right, so action item 7 is our health benefits broker. We do have a rate change this year. When we signed with GBS, I believe 3 years ago, it was a flat fee. The market has changed how we pay that. We'll be moving to a per employee per month fee, and that is actually included with our Blue Cross costs. So you'll see a decrease out of the wellness budget for $42,000, and then this payment to GBS will be made based on a per employee per month. It'll be funded between the employee and the city.
Questions?
Do you have an action item on this one?
Linda?
I move to approve the health benefits broker renewal. Is that what it is?
It is.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Lyric and a second by Cheatham. Is there any discussion? Chris?
No, I was getting ready to vote.
Oh, okay. Then we will go ahead and call the roll then. Motion by Lyric and a second by Cheatham. Could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Lurick,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Ortega,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to the next one.
Action item 8 is the addition of the Health Joy app. This is a new feature we would be adding for fiscal year 21, and this replaces and is even more enhanced than the Teledoc service we dropped in fiscal year 2020. The app cost per year will be roughly $34,242. It's a $6.50 per employee per month charge. That $6.50 does cover the employee and any people who are on their medical plan with them. So my slide's a little misleading in how it's housed. So after talking with finance, when an employee pays a premium and the city pays a premium, we would then reconcile and pay that money directly to Health Joy. So the employees are funding a portion of this. That is one change I found out once I talked a little bit more about reconciliation efforts. HR is pretty excited about this. I've listed some of the key features that I'm interested in. The top 2, the health wallet. If you have vision insurance with the city or with VSP anywhere, you don't get a benefits card. So employees often ask where they get that. With Health Joy, they would log into the app and all of their digital cards would be listed there. Telemedicine, this is a big deal coming out of COVID because many more people are familiar with telemedicine. When you call into Health Joy, there's a $0 copay, which means it's not hitting our medical experience. So I think the cost savings for this are an aggressive move we can take this year to help control costs for next year. Claudia, did you have a question?
So we have, it looks like I've got Linda
Yeah.
Linda's got a question.
I do. I am one of those people who have used telemedicine since the COVID situation and realized the benefits of that. I mean, it was a very positive experience. And I know AJ has mentioned how we as a city were kind of slow to use that. And so maybe one of the positive outcomes of this current situation is that we will jump on that bandwagon and start using that more. So I think that's a good thing and a way we can save money. My question is about the doctor that you use with telemedicine. Will employees be able to use telemedicine but use the doctor they already go to? Or does it mean they have to see someone else?
They will see someone else. It's going to be different probably every time too. So HealthJoy contracts with different providers across the United States. They are licensed in Idaho, but they could be housed anywhere. One example we give is my brother actually went on and did the telemedicine through HealthJoy. It ended up being our childhood pediatrician who was in California retired. So you just never know
who you're going to get. Is there any benefit, like if an employee uses telemedicine with a doctor they're already working with, let's say it's follow-up for something and they need to talk to that doctor, is there then any benefit to that, or does it just not fit within this plan?
It doesn't really fit within this plan. This plan is really for acute situations where you kind of know what you've got going on. You know you've got a sinus infection. You know you've got strep throat. You know you've got a child with pink eye, or maybe it's a small, like a rash issue or something like that you've taken a picture of and you want to get checked out. This is for very minor things. This isn't for anything serious that would need follow-up. We would actually recommend that the employee or the dependent go and see their actual provider or an urgent care for something like that that needs follow-up.
Okay. Thank you.
We got Claudia, Chris, then Rick.
So I have a question, because I have access to all of these things on our insurance company's website. So I'm just wondering why we need to have an app that we have a $50,000 setup fee for and then an ongoing $34,000 maintenance, when the employee should just be able to go to their insurance company website and see their list of benefits and see their in-network and out-of-network providers and deal with bill review.
So the way it works currently is with Blue Cross is it's free right now during COVID, but generally it's anywhere from a $30 to a $40 copayment, and that's just through Blue Cross. And then in order to see providers, you would have to go to Blue Cross's website, then you'd have to go to Delta Dental's website, then you'd have to go to VSP's website. Same thing with OneBridge, all that contact information. We're putting it all in one place in the application. We actually use this exact same app for all of our benefits.
No, and I understand that, but a website is free, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
I have to do the same thing. I have to go on the insurance company's website, and then there's a link to my vision insurance and my dental insurance, but I can get all of this information. So it does take a little more work, but I'm not asking anybody to spend another $84,000.
Keep in mind though too that the majority of this is the telemedicine. If we were to have telemedicine in-house, it would probably be $450 per employee per month. The app and the other benefits on top of that are pretty minimal compared to the telemedicine on that. So, and the problem we had before, anytime you have telemedicine with like a co-payment, you know, you bring up the Blue Cross, the MD Live, which they have for free, but they charge the co-payment. Utilization you see generally anywhere from 2 to 8%. Most of my groups right now on the telemedicine with the $0 copayment are running anywhere from 20 to 40% utilization. Usually you see a 2-to-1 return on your investment just from savings, from people not running to the ER, running to the urgent care, running to the provider, let alone the app and the time it saves HR.
So how much are the employees paying of this?
It depends on the tier. It goes back to the 5, 10, 15, depending on the tier they're at for coverage, whether it's employee only, employee and spouse, employee and child, or employee and children, or family. So
we're talking about the $650?
Correct.
Okay.
Chris, and then Rick.
Yeah, at this point, my head is beginning to swim in numbers. So Heather or AJ, at the end of the day, with all the substitutions and everything, adding this Health Joy app adds how much to the city budget?
So the numbers I presented for the overall decrease included this. So if we extract the Health Joy app and the launch, the Health Joy app is 34,000. We would take that away, and then the launch is 50,000. We would take that away.
And the launch would be this next year only. So
Yes,
the
it's
ongoing
one-time.
cost would be 34 or whatever.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Rick?
AJ, how secure is Health Wallet? I'm concerned about having a lot of employee information out there that might be hacked. Has there been a problem with it at all?
No, like I said, we use it internally ourselves. So it's got no like individual information. It doesn't have your date of birth on there. It doesn't have your social security number. It has your ID number with Blue Cross. It has your ID number with Delta Dental, VSP, all those types of things. So it doesn't have your personal identifiers in it. It just has like what the identifier is with each company. So it's a little bit different as far as what you need to worry about.
Okay. Chris, did you have something else?
Sorry, no.
I do.
Okay, Linda? Linda and then Heidi.
Okay, I just wanted to understand, we're talking about adding this app, but Heather, you mentioned this is included in, and I'll say it again, the 12.74% decrease in cost. So it's already included in that, right?
It is.
But the other part of this is what I'm understanding or what I'm hearing is that we will realize a lot of savings in medical costs by using this app. So we have the cost, but we have to weigh that against what we would save. I mean, not only is it already built into our overall plan cost, which is going down, but what I'm hearing AJ saying is like using telemedicine more, using this app and these features, people will use that instead of going to a doctor. So we'll see a lot of other savings in using this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But you can't put any kind of
Heidi, and then
figure on
Adrian.
that.
No.
It's going to depend on utilization. It's going to depend on how much your employees utilize it. To be honest with you, if it was pre-COVID, I don't know that we would have done this, Heather, because we've done this before. We had a telemedicine program and it wasn't utilized very well by city employees. But post-COVID, I think we've seen the employees really engage in the Zoom meetings, the GoToMeet, things of that nature. And I think that we can actually get some more participation. And that's also part of the launch. Drive that a little bit more, to be honest with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Heidi, then Roger, then Chris, then Claudia.
Yeah. Those were kind of my same questions. I just wanted to clarify, but I think based on the other questions, my understanding is that the negative 12% number that was on the screen, which resulted in 873,926, if we did not do the Health Joy app, we would add back in the 34,000 and the 50,000, and so we'd be looking at saving 958,168. Is that
That's correct.
Okay, so that was my other concern, I guess, was the fact that we thought that Teladoc would save us a lot in the past, and so we kind of went with that, and then we didn't really take to it. So that's just, I guess, it's kind of just hopeful. We don't really have any way of knowing for sure that it is going to be a savings to us, but we hope. Is that accurate?
So previously, we did not pay for our Teladoc service. It was included with our broker expense. The reason we're bringing it this year in two parts, the app and the launch, is to try to push the program kind of into popularity. I would like both items to go together or not at all.
Do we need
Okay,
to, sorry, do we need to do it like this year, or could we still do Health Joy next year if we decided?
We can always, if you decide not to go with an item, I can bring it back at a future time if you're interested.
I don't see it being viable, to be honest with you, in the future, just for the fact, like, I don't think we're ever going to see a decrease like this moving forward. So that's why that's another reason why we really looked at it this year, was we're going in with a decrease. There's not going to be an increase to the city cost or the employees. So that was the perfect time to bring it forward as well.
Okay, Roger, Chris,
Okay.
Claudia, then Linda.
One of the things I think we need to consider is some of these budget items are investments towards our future as well as in the present budget. If we are able to take advantage of people's reliance on telemedicine that has been generated in the last few months, and we can encourage them to continue to develop that reliance, we could be looking at flattening, well, not flattening, we could be looking at decreasing what our premium may be next year, because we have experience that deflects this away from the hard costs or high costs of going to doctor's offices or emergency rooms, and gets things taken care of at a much more economical level.
Absolutely, I'd agree.
Chris?
Yes, I just want to go back to the Linda's comment. What I'm understanding is the savings that would be experienced would actually be on the employees' end, because they would be able to get advice on whatever without having a copay. And so the financial benefit to the city is really what Roger is talking about. It's if we have fewer uses of emergency room and doctors. So the benefit to, we might not see such large increases in our healthcare costs in the future. So the benefits, or the financial benefits to the city itself, are actually indirect. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. It's going to be based on future years' experience. You know, it's going to be lowering our overall experience and lowering that renewal is the hope. So
That right, but so that's a, you know, it's a working theory, but any actual financial dollar savings this year would go to the person who is actually using the telemedicine, because they wouldn't have the copay that they would normally have.
correct. And then it would go to the city next year if it lowered the overall experience.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Claudia, then Linda.
So, two things, I guess. How are these HRA VIBA incentives panning out to begin with? Because I asked that question a couple weeks ago during the budget meeting of Ann, and so I'd like to know, because I didn't understand that I thought the 50,000 was going to the app, but the 50,000 is actually $100 to each city employee that downloads the app, right?
The addition, so action item 9 is the addition of the Health Joy launch. That's what I'm calling it. This is a one-time, one-year cost. We're saying roughly 500 participants at $100 a piece for the 50,000. Any employee who enrolls with Health Joy, we would get a report from Health Joy saying the employee had signed up, would receive a $100 VIBA payment into their VIBA account this year only, to help us push the program.
Right. So again, my question is regarding all these other VIBA, HRA incentive things. How do what is the return of investment? I mean, is it working? Is my question. I mean, we're giving people $700 to do this and $100 to do that. Is that actually working?
Yeah, definitely. If you take a look at the wellness program, oh, sorry, do you want to go, Heather?
No, I was going to ask you to talk about our wellness utilization.
Okay. So if you look at the wellness program and what we did, like, I'll be honest with you, Anne's got the most comprehensive wellness program put together that we've seen in any of our groups. She's done an amazing job with it. But just this last year, we caught 2 breast cancers early. You know, catching them early can cost you, $10,000 to $40,000, as opposed to catching them late, which usually ends up closer to $60,000 to $180,000. So just those 2 breast cancers that we know of that we caught saved the city well over probably $120,000 to $160,000. And those are just 2 that we know of. That doesn't count of all the other things that we found out. So the program pays for itself and then some, just with employee education and getting people in and getting people tested. You know, what happens generally with the wellness program is you're catching things before someone has symptoms of it. And that's what we did, this year, obviously, the 2 breast cancers, and every year, before and hopefully after as well.
Okay, so considering the whole COVID thing and what you said a few minutes ago, that people are now embracing the go-to-meeting with their doctor and the teledoc and all of that stuff. Do you think that we need to spend the $50,000? Could we spend $25,000?
The problem with your group, for some reason, your employees have been really slow to engage in technology. Honestly, compared to our other cities, your utilization was about half of what we were seeing in our other cities and schools. And so that's why we were hoping maybe doing something like this to, kind of engage your employees and get them excited about it and to see how easy it really is. It was our thinking with it, because it will pay off in the long run, $100 to each employee. If each employee, used it for 1 doctor visit, we saved, the average doctor visit runs between $120 and $140. We saved, $20 to $40.
Okay.
Okay, we've got Linda and then Chris.
I was actually ready to make a motion.
Okay, then we've got Chris.
So AJ, again, I just want to make sure I understand. When you say catching, apart from all the obvious benefits for the individual and Yahoo, getting breast cancers caught early, but the actual savings was in the fact that there wasn't as high, there were 2 claims that could have been, half again as large by members of our pool, right?
Correct. Yes.
So the city didn't really directly save $40,000 on a breast cancer. The patient saved, a claim that was twice as big, but the savings is in the indirect supposition, the supposition that the city saves indirectly because our claims were lower than they would have otherwise been.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Linda. Linda, just a minute. We've got Roger and then Heidi.
I don't think it's fair to just categorize our savings in the future. I think our wellness program has been a driving force that got us to this big reduction in our insurance this year. Now, it's not guaranteed going forward, but it's the implementation of all these things over years that has helped us to perform at a better level than what we're seeing some of our surrounding cities doing. One of the elements we are missing is this component. We understand other cities have this going, but yet they had higher rates than we did. And I think we can help our position by doing this. But part of what we have done in the past is what got us to our low collective healthcare rate this year.
Heidi, you had something, and then we'll go back to Linda.
Yeah, So just help me through this. So on the 50,000 that people would get in their VIBA as the incentive for downloading the app, all they would really have to do is download it and set up an account. They wouldn't actually have to utilize it the first time or something like that. So they could possibly just do it to get the $100 and then not actually go through with it, right?
That's correct. HR doesn't actually get a report of employees' utilization on any of our benefits by person. So the only thing we would be able to access is if they had enrolled in the program.
Okay, and I'm sorry that I'm just being so skeptical about it. I just am remembering that we had this very similar conversation about Teledoc, and we're very hopeful that it would really catch on and that it would save us. And then everybody was kind of surprised when nobody really took to it and nobody really used it. And I remember it was pretty well advertised. I mean, I was getting stuff from, you know, emails and different things about Teledoc all the time, encouraging me to set it up and use it. So I guess I just see that dollar amount and I'm very hesitant. I would love it if we knew like of a guarantee that it would be effective in the future, but based upon our Teledoc experience, I'm just still really, I guess, struggling with it a little bit. And I hate to expend, you know, quite a bit of money if we're not really fairly confident that it's actually going to be a benefit and a savings in the future. We're just hopeful at this point.
Isn't there one big difference though? When we talked about Teledoc and used that, it was the pre-COVID world. I think many people who were reluctant to use telemedicine have now been introduced to it out of necessity and have realized that it is a benefit. And with this, they'll see that, you know, not only is it easy to use, but it will save them money, save them time. We all know the old saying, time is money. So I think the response to it in a, you know, COVID world versus how people responded to telemedicine or Teledoc in a pre-COVID world, I think those are going to be very different situations.
I would agree.
Roger?
There's
And
nothing
Chris,
in
did you
this
have
that
your hand
precludes us from setting aside more of the VIBA plan as an extra incentive. In other words, we just like we do a requirement of attending the healthcare or the health fair as an incentive to get a portion of your VIBA, we could put another $100 out of the VIBA we already have to go with this $100 to create a greater incentive. I mean, there's other ways I think we could look at this too.
Chris?
Yeah, I share some of Heidi's skepticism because I think, and I don't necessarily believe that because people were scared that they had COVID-19 and wanted to talk to a healthcare provider post haste means that 6 months, 2 years, whenever, that's sort of, you know, mentally history. I'm not sure that, you know, my ankle's gonna hurt and I'm gonna immediately think, oh, I think I'll use telemedicine. You know, I think the human brain frequently functions pretty siloed. But I do think that since we can't get, and I suppose it has to do with HIPAA laws, but since we can't get verification that an individual participant has made a call, obviously we can't know what they called about or anything. I like Roger's suggestion where we simply take the money we already have and attach a few more strings to it.
The only problem is you can't affect each employee equally on that. The police collective bargaining agreement gives them the lump sum of $1,300 as second pay in January with the wellness piece. So if we pull money out of what we're already doing, it will hit general employees different than our police union. And I just hesitate to cause a bigger division among things.
Right, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I guess I'd like to think of creative ways, because, you know, $100 is $100, and if all I have to do is download an app to get $100 and never use it, and we have some evidence that we're slow to go that route for whatever reason, I just am really waffling about this.
And I just wanted to make one clarification. When I'm talking about people using telemedicine because of the COVID-19 situation, I'm not talking about people who think they have COVID-19. They used it for all other kinds of reasons rather than go to their doctor's office physically. So it's not just people using it because they thought they had the virus, but use was up in general.
Sure.
So I think that will change things going forward, personally.
Yep, that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Claudia?
So, first of all, I think that people used telemedicine with the COVID thing because we didn't have too many choices. Doctors weren't seeing people unless it was COVID related. So, you know, we need to, you know, understand that. So it wasn't necessarily a choice. It was the only way you could see your doctor. I want to go on record as saying that I like the idea of the app. My hesitation is in the incentive. I personally, I'm against paying people to do something that's good for them. I think that's ridiculous. But what about this, Heather? What if the $100, if the employee downloads the app, and when they make their first appointment and they get their appointment confirmation, they can bring that appointment confirmation in, and that's when they get their $100. So that now we know they're using it.
I would hesitate to have HR have to look at employees' personal medical or their dependents' data.
Well, the appointment isn't going to say isn't going to say anything other than Mary Smith has an appointment with Teladoc or whatever it's called on Thursday at 2:00. That's all it's going to say. It's not going to say, I'm not saying the diagnosis or the test results. I mean, there's no HIPAA violation there if the employee brings it in. Just showing, hey, I made an appointment.
That's still a gray area, though. Go ahead, sorry, Ann.
What?
Go ahead, AJ.
That's still a gray area, though. Anytime you include utilization, like an employee, so let's say you have an employee that comes in, they do that, and then they get let go later. There's attorneys that are chasing this kind of thing around. We're seeing it a lot in Utah and in northern Idaho. You let me go because you know I have health conditions because I did the telemedicine or something like that. We're having that a lot with those buy downs of different things. So that's why we're trying to separate as much as we can in that situation.
But I'm not talking about getting something after the appointment. I'm talking about they have an appointment. When I make an appointment with my doctor, I get an email that says, you have an appointment on this day. That's it. That's it. That's not any information. Nobody can be let go because they make a doctor's appointment.
No, they can't. But
there's labor laws on the books that protect the employee. If we as a city are stupid enough to fire somebody because they make a doctor's appointment, then we deserve the lawsuit.
If I may intervene here, Council, I have to agree with AJ. It wouldn't be the city firing them because they made the appointment. It would be the city or the employee making that claim after the termination for another reason. And I have to say that I would agree that even the existence of a doctor's appointment is an act that is protected by HIPAA. So we have to be really careful in that regard.
Okay, then I'm going to go on record as saying I'm all in favor of the app, not in favor of the incentive. Let's do the app without paying people to do what's good for them.
Roger, go ahead. Then Chris.
I wanted to speak to the concern about doctor's appointments. a lot of times you can tell specifically by the appointment with a specific doctor what they're in for. You can tell if somebody's going to a gynecologist what it is. You can tell if they're going to a psychiatrist what it is. You can tell if they're going for other, there's just a lot of specific things that we shouldn't know about. And I understand the component of not intruding in that way. It's being invasive, a little bit of private information. I really think you have to incentivize people these days. I would be in favor of the $50,000 incentive. It's a one-time shot. We're going to have to drive this with our own HR department as well. And to have them directing people to a reward is an important thing. And I really think that we have to continually be proactive in terms of trying to control our healthcare costs.
Rick, then Chris.
I
and then Heidi.
agree. I agree with Roger. I don't think the app is a benefit to the employee as much as it is a benefit to the city overall and all the taxpayers. If we can drive more usage to the app, we'll cut our long-term healthcare costs, and that's a benefit not just to the employee but to all of us.
Thank you, Chris. Go ahead.
Well, I think maybe we're overlooking the fact that there's already an incentive, and maybe, which is the lack of a copay. And so I wonder if we, I wonder, no one can answer this, I know, but I wonder how different would it be if we didn't reward people, but we simply pushed the heck out of the fact that you can save yourself money by simply using this app. Because in a sense, as I'm looking at this, the incentive is built in. I mean, it's built in. And I understand the incentivize people part, but I also have some concerns about when there's already an incentive to the individual, then essentially sort of in a way enabling them by teaching them that to do something that's already in their best interest, they should get paid for that. I mean, I have some reservations about that philosophy. And I guess I'd like to see us really push it internally, push the incentive that's already built in internally, see what happens. And if it flops, and then next year we want to say, well, okay, let's try incentivizing it, see if it makes a difference. Maybe we could do it that way.
Heidi?
So isn't that kind of what we already did with Teladoc? Was the incentive was already built in, and people should have looked at that and said, hey, this is a benefit to me, I should jump all over this, but for whatever reason, people didn't take to it. So that's my concern. And it sounds like a lot of people are in support of it, and that's fine. I hope that we can maybe have a report on this next year, and if it is successful, I want you to come and totally rub it in my face. But right now I'm looking at the $80-something thousand that we could have in savings, which is a bird in the hand, versus the two in the bush, which could be more savings in the future. And I'm just thinking I want to jump on the bird in the hand and take the savings and not direct those towards something else right now that's unknown.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
And I'm going to go ahead and make my motion, but before I do, I was just going to respond to Heidi's comment. I think that that's not taking into account the overall long-term savings that we could get if we drive usage of this program. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I mean, back to what Roger was talking about, how the actions that we've taken over several years have brought our healthcare costs down and gotten us into this situation that we're in this year. So it's those proactive steps, and I look at this as one of those. So on that note, what I wanted to do was combine action items 8 and 9 into one motion. Can I do that? So
8 and 9.
yeah, because they're both about
Yeah,
the
they're
app.
both the same thing. Yeah.
And
I
Heather
think-
said they're tied together. She doesn't want to
Yeah.
do one
I
without
think
the
we
other.
can. Yes.
Okay. So I move that we approve the addition of the Health Joy app, which is action item number 8, as well as the addition of the Health Joy launch, action item number 9, as Heather has presented today.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Lyric and a second by Cheatham.
No,
And
we need to vote on those separately. Those are two separate things. Those are two separate things. Because then a yes vote is a yes on both, and a no vote is a vote on both.
Well, we wouldn't do one without the other. That's what Heather was saying.
Well,
They're tied together.
no, they're not. We can still do the app without paying people to download it. That can be done.
we can do this. We can do this in two different motions if the motion maker would like to amend her motion. If not, then we've got a motion on the floor and we'll vote and see how it goes. And so
I was following Heather's recommendation of not doing one without the other, but I can do them separately. I move that we approve action item number 8, the addition of the Health Joy app.
Second.
okay, we have an amended motion by Lyric and a second by Cheatham. Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Lurick,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Adamson. Can't hear her. Adamson,
I hope you guys are right and I'm wrong on this, but right now, no.
Bray,
Yes.
Ortega,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Linda? you have another
Yeah,
motion?
I'll make a second motion. I move that we approve the addition of the Health Joy launch, action item number 9, as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Lyric and a second by Cheatham. Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Lurick,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Adamson,
No.
Bray,
Yes.
Ortega,
No.
Stevens,
No.
Vlad,
I think this is a great program and it gives us an opportunity, so I am a yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now we will get to agenda item 10.
I'm
Miss-
going to turn over presentation to Chris.
Oh,
because
hold on. We've got Chris has a question.
Yes, can we somehow guarantee, I don't know how things are kept track of from one year to the next, but I really feel strongly that we need to have a very thorough report next year. And it's going to be difficult, but we need to try to be able to draw some straight lines between incentivizing people and how paying people to do what's in their best interest is benefiting the taxpayers. I really would like that in the minutes or whatever that ensures that we come back to this next year with some data and research, which I understand it's going to be difficult, but I think we need to not just believe, I think we need to try to know.
Claudia, I'm sorry, Chris, I will assure you that this is on next year's benefits presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving to agenda item, or action item 10, not agenda item. Heather, you're up.
So action item 10, when we set up the renewal, we actually already removed health coaching. So this is something we added for this fiscal year. And as you can see, our utilization has been very low. So we're bringing it back to council. I've already removed this cost from the renewal. So if council chooses to keep health coaching, I will need to increase our cost by the $3,951. What I'm looking for is an action item to eliminate the health coaching. This is eligible for any participant in the plan who's an employee and their spouse. This fiscal year, they've reached out to 109 members and only 2 people have engaged for a total of 4 coaching sessions. So as you can see, our utilization is about $1,000 a session. So we didn't think this benefit was worth continuing.
Mr. Mayor,
Heather,
I
what
move.
is health coaching?
Hold on. We're going to, it sounds like we've got a motion and about ready to go, but I've got Roger, then Claudia, then Chris. And I'm assuming Chris sounded like a motion, but we'll see.
Well,
Then Heidi after that.
I was going to make a motion, so I'll defer to whom you called on first.
Okay. All right, Claudia, did you have a comment?
I'm just curious as to what health coaching is.
So what health coaching is if someone actually calls into Blue Cross and let's say they want to help, stop smoking, they want to help losing some weight, maybe they want some, ideas for lifestyle changes, something like that. They call in and then they'll get with like a health coach, almost like a life coach that's going to help them with that incentive. And they check in with them on a weekly, maybe a monthly basis, depending on what it is. And that's what.
Okay.
The big,
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I might add, Claudia, that was something that we added last year a little bit to help with the control our expenses this year. And so I think it was something that was beneficial for
So
us.
it was an incentive of sorts to the employee to be able to get free what they would normally pay for. And we ended up with 2 people utilizing it.
No,
Yeah,
I don't know how many people used it. What?
2. It says right here.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Heidi, you had something, and then we'll jump back to Chris.
I was just going to make a motion like everybody
Oh,
else.
okay, so everybody wanted to make a motion on this. Chris, you're up.
Okay, I make a motion that we eliminate health coaching as per action item number 10.
Second.
Rick got that one. I mean, he got quick. He's sneaky. You got to watch him. So we've got a motion by Stevens and a second by Cheatham.
Okay.
Could you please call the roll?
Stevens,
Yes.
Cheatham,
Yes.
Adamson,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Lurick,
Yes.
Ortega,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Heather, what else do we have here? Let's continue on.
The next slide is this was a list of all the action items I needed you to make decisions on today, and you have done that 10 times for me, so thank you. This is kind of a summary of what we talked about today. Then,
Okay.
Chris, can you move to the employee benefits with no changes slide? So this is our Delta Dental renewal and our vision. Again, there were no changes to these, but these are ones we frequently talk about. So I didn't want you to think I had just forgotten about them. Dental remained flat. The city does pay a portion. Vision is entirely employee funded.
Roger, do you have something? Okay, you just went off. Okay. Go ahead, Heather.
The
Sorry.
next slide. So the next slide, I just wanted to touch briefly on compensation for 21. Our current commitments that we've made with compensation for next year, with the police tentative agreement on the police CBA, we've agreed to a rank advancement and 1 step if they're eligible. Police management, we have not committed to any new expenses. The fire CBA, we tentatively agreed to. We've agreed to rank advancements and longevity advancement. Fire management, I don't actually have a mechanism to end longevity advancement for them, so there is no step movements for them. So we would allow the longevity to continue. And then the last category is any employee on the hybrid plan, that's general employees and police civilians. There are no step movements that we've committed to. I bring that up because I know there was some confusion on salary projections. Historically, the city has always put in a step movement when we talk about salary projections, which is why the data was presented that way. I know there was some concern from council that we had committed to that. We didn't. That was just our normal presentation method. So we have not signed on for that expense. And then the last slide of my presentation is the decisions that I'll be bringing next week that you'll need to make decisions on. Hybrid pay table, do we revamp the steps and do we grant a step movement? And then police management costs, do we grant a step? And then we need to talk about the variable or seasonal pay grade table. I just wanted to briefly touch on those so you knew where we were headed.
So Heather, the question has been asked, and then we'll get to you, Roger. The question has been asked, and I haven't seen it. Maybe it's because I get bombarded by stuff. But what was the dollar amount to these rank advancements and steps and the longevity for the fire and police? What was the dollar amounts that we committed to? That has been asked. Have we got those? What's going on with that?
Ashley talked about that briefly last week. We need to make a slight correction in that. We did include management in those costs. So I'll break that down next week because we are not committed to the police management steps, or we are committed for the unions. And I don't know if we have that broken down at this level right now.
So yeah, that was the question, was the unions and what those numbers look like. And so if we can get those, that'd be great. Roger?
Yeah, I presented those last week.
And I
So
asked
I
for
can
them to
email
be
that
sent
out
out.
as well. I can email
I
it out.
asked for them to be emailed out that day. So,
So will you,
because
can we email those out this morning or this afternoon, I mean? Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
that was one of my points. Until we get the big picture, I have real trouble trying to define the little pictures. Until we kind of know where we have already made commitments, it's real hard to look at capital outlays and more salary outlays. So that's first comment. Second comment, how did fire management get locked into longevity advancement? I thought they were outside the union.
They are, but they currently only exist on the old pay scale, which was tied to fire. When we moved on to the hybrid, fire is they're still on the old city chart. They just see the increases that fire does. We do have the option of rolling their longevity into their base pay and moving them onto the hybrid table. That's something that I could bring next week if you're interested in that.
Well, I really think that when we negotiate with the union, we negotiate with the union, and individuals who are outside of it should not be considered to be a part of it.
And because fire management doesn't have steps, we've allowed that longevity to continue. Again, if that's something you want me to bring forward, I'm happy.
That's something I was not aware of.
Yeah, longevity still exists for the 4 members of fire management.
Well, but I was not aware of that. I don't think this is the first time I believe we've had conversation on that. Thank you.
Could you bring that, Heather, next week?
I can.
That would be great.
And then Chris?
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know when we can get, you know, our projected revenues, but I'm really uncomfortable making decisions about expenses without having any idea what our projected revenues are. And I know that that's difficult under the present circumstances, but my impression was last week that some of these conversations that are happening this week are happening this week because we would have better budget projections. And so I'm assuming that we'll have revenue projections a few days in advance of next week, because I'm not going to be able to just look at that, you know, at 8 o'clock the night before and be ready to roll by 9 o'clock the next morning.
So, Chris, that's a good point. That is one reason why I've pulled these off, so we could get to this point, so we can get better numbers for revenue, and we'll have some idea of what the employee compensation package is going to look like. We will talk about, I'm going to flip these around next week so that revenue is first and then employee compensation is second. That's what needs to happen, so we can have what we need. We desperately need some time to be able to discuss this and be able to look at that. The issue with getting what can happen is the revenues, we decide what those revenues are going to look like from historical background. And so maybe we can get, I'm not sure how to get that out. Jared, how can we get that out a couple days ahead of that? Can we email that and then give everybody a hard packet the night before?
Sure.
Jared, are you on?
If it's the PIA that is a part of the agenda item and that's going to be part of the meeting, then we can get that out as soon as it's ready.
Okay, so what typically happens is we'll have a picture of what we've had in the past and what AIC is anticipating and stuff, so it will give us a little bit of an idea of what we can look at and what we can consider. And so we will I'll see if we can't get that pulled together probably by Tuesday of next week, to see if we can get that revenue, just those things out Tuesday, and then we'll be able to have a discussion on that, and then the employee compensation, so it might help it go a little bit smoother.
Yeah, thank you, because I don't know that we can just go off historical data given COVID and sales tax and all of that,
Sure.
Although with online sales tax in place now, I mean, there are just so many variables. And then I'm still unclear on what, if any, impact new legislation has on our revenues. And I just need to get that all pulled together. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Rick, you have something?
Yeah, I just want to remind Chris that the state is not sharing online revenues with local jurisdictions. The legislature chose not to do that, so we won't get any piece of that.
Yeah, point well taken. And that's part of my concern, is that even though sales tax is up, unless the state decides to be more generous and alter their sharing mechanism. So, you know, then our sales tax may dive.
So, and I know the governor, Chris, is looking at this, and hopefully we can have an idea of what the governor is looking to do. But there is the COVID-19 stimulus money that I know the governor is trying to help the cities as much as he possibly can with those. And so hopefully by next week, we'll be able to have an idea of what that looks like. But there again, it's a discussion that's going to take a minute, I think. So
great.
Good points. Claudia?
So I just wanted to remind Ashley, if you're still there, to send out the slides that didn't match what we had earlier. So that if you could just email those out, that would be great. Thank you.
The slides, and then also the numbers that we were supposed to get out last week for the unions on that. So looks like Ashley's right there. So sounds good. Okay, anything else, council? All right, thank you very much. I look forward to actually seeing you in person. I can't wait for next week's meeting so that we can be there in person. I'm hoping beyond hope that the governor moves us into stage 3. He hasn't tipped his hat yet, and so we're hoping that he does that. So with that, Rick, you just clicked your microphone on.
Hasta la vista.
It's great. Thank you very much, Council. We'll talk to you later. With that, we are adjourned.